I sat in the combat room of the base vehicle, holding the AM sniper rifle, quietly observing the surroundings. After the modification, the combat room had a slightly wider field of vision, but because it was blocked by residential buildings, the line of sight was still very limited. The safety of the entire scurrying squad now rested on Ren Shiyu's shoulders. Shiyu sat on the sofa, her eyes closed, her brows slightly furrowed. Within her spiritual domain, no fluctuation could be hidden. She saw the horde of gray zombies engaging with soldiers in orange hazmat suits. Even though the zombies in this area were irradiated, they still weren't enough of a threat to the tanks and armored vehicles. At first glance, the situation seemed to be progressing very smoothly. But right at that moment, Shiyu suddenly sensed something abnormal and called out loudly, "Brother Jiang, over there." I was in a state of high concentration, so when I heard her call, my first reflex wasn't to turn my head, but to immediately adjust the AM scope and scan the entire surrounding area. In a life-and-death battle with an unknown enemy, even a second of delay could cost you your life. At 7 o'clock, about 800 meters away, on the 7th floor of a residential building, there were survivors. About 15 to 16 people. Oh, survivors? I breathed a sigh of relief. When the apocalypse broke out, the workers in the nuclear power plant area were almost completely wiped out. The remaining survivors were all gathered in the residential buildings. Logically speaking, after a long period of food shortage and radiation exposure, none of those people should have survived. Only soldiers and scientists with full protective gear could have held out until now. Report to the command center. The closer we got to completing the mission, the less I dared to let my guard down for even a moment. My eyes vigilantly scanned the surroundings, while communication was left to Zhu Ying. Zhu Ying held the walkie-talkie, her voice cold and concise. Scurrying squad has spotted survivors. 7 o'clock direction, 800 meters away, top floor. In the armored vehicle, Lin Yaoshan's heart tightened upon hearing this. Survivors? It was 99% likely to be the trapped scientists. Previously, they only had a rough location, and finding them exactly would have taken a lot of time. Yet the scurrying squad found them so quickly. Is this all thanks to that girl surnamed Ren's ability? This kind of power is truly terrifying. Lin Yaoshan understood very well the value of detection abilities in this era. Especially in urban combat with dense buildings, this ability was practically priceless. This is command. All units advance towards the 7 o'clock direction. The closer they got to the target, the more cautious Lin Yaoshan became. Knowing the scientists were in a residential area far from the nuclear plant's core, the military had deliberately avoided the most dangerous zones from the start. The 700-meter distance only took a few minutes. As they approached, through the armored vehicle's observation window, Lin Yaoshan saw figures in hazmat suits standing on the balcony, waving frantically. Their emotions were obvious even through binoculars. It really is the trapped scientists and soldiers. He breathed a sigh of relief, finally confirming they were safe. As long as they got them into the vehicles, the mission would be half done. The armored vehicles stopped below the building. The entrance to the residential area was completely sealed off, piled high with heavy objects behind it. This was the only way the soldiers could hold out in an environment full of irradiated zombies. At this time, some people started clearing the obstacles in front of the door. I stayed in the combat room. Up to this point, no dangerous situations had occurred, as the zombies rushing the convoy had been completely wiped out. Li Yuhan could hardly contain her emotions. She had seen the figures of her mother and grandfather through the window. Even though they were wearing bulky hazmat suits and masks, she recognized them immediately. These past few days, she had lived in constant anxiety and fear. On the way here, she couldn't stop thinking about the worst-case scenarios. Just imagining it was enough to suffocate her. When the barricades were cleared, the survivors who had been trapped for days were finally reunited with the military. Stepping outside, everyone felt as if they were seeing the light after a long time in the dark. Li Yuhan and Song Jiawen immediately grabbed their medical kits and got out of the vehicle. After a long time in the irradiated zone, these people must be exhausted, not to mention the elderly scientists. Professor Su, let me put you down. Stand steady. A young soldier cheerfully carried Professor Su out on his back. Someone immediately came to support him. Grandpa, Li Yuhan ran over, dropped her medical kit, and hugged her mother tightly. The bulky hazmat suits made a full embrace difficult, but she still tried to hold her mother as tightly as possible. Tears streamed down uncontrollably, her eyes red, her nose stinging. She held Su Tong and her grandfather's hands, looking at her mother's gaunt face and her grandfather's ulcerated skin under the masks, and her tears finally fell. Su Tong cried too. Even Professor Su's eyes turned red. He turned his head away, not wanting his granddaughter to see him weak. Yuhan, why did you come here? Professor Su's voice carried a hint of blame, but he couldn't bring himself to be strict. He understood how much danger his granddaughter had braved on the journey here. Su Tong thought of what her daughter had endured, and her tears fell even harder. But these were tears of joy for being alive. In the apocalypse, separation and death were all too common. But when it fell upon your own family, the pain was unbearable. The young soldier watched the scene with a gentle smile. But right after, he suddenly collapsed to the ground. Su Tong cried out in panic. Let me see. Someone did a quick check and said he was suffering from exhaustion and malnutrition and needed to be brought into the vehicle immediately. Li Yuhan immediately ran over, not having time to chat further with her family, and quickly jumped in to help. Song Jian also brought her medical kit, reassured the two professors, checked their heart rates and pulses, and gave them vitamins. Her gentle voice put people at ease. Professor Su was still worried about the experimental samples, but after being reassured that someone would take care of them, he finally felt relieved. In the minibus, Shiyu was still trying to expand her spiritual perception because everyone was paused right now, making it very easy to attract zombies. Everyone understood this, so after a preliminary check of the survivors, the convoy would immediately pull out. But right at that moment, Shiyu suddenly felt her spiritual domain being affected by something. I heard Shiyu say she felt a very strange sensation, like someone suddenly pricking her with a needle. The feeling was extremely faint. If she hadn't been expanding her spiritual domain, she probably would have missed it completely. Shiyu was startled, a terrifying speculation immediately popping into her head. Could it be that spiritual-type monster? She immediately expanded the range of her spiritual domain, tensely scanning a 1 to 2 kilometer radius around them. But the only thing she could sense were the vague spiritual clusters of wandering zombies in the distance. Shiyu's voice echoed directly in my head, warning me that she might have touched the spiritual-type monster and that I had to be extremely careful. My heart immediately tightened. Almost by reflex, I quickly used the walkie-talkie to report to Lin Yaoshan. At the same time, I retreated into the base vehicle and raised my gun, my eyes not leaving any blind spots. Lin Yaoshan didn't dare delay either, immediately ordering all units to raise their alert level to the maximum. The tense atmosphere quickly spread everywhere, especially among the newly rescued survivors. While protecting them, the armored vehicles had formed a semicircular defensive perimeter around the residential building. Aside from those directly assisting, all remaining soldiers focused on standing guard, both defending and eliminating small groups of approaching zombies. Shiyu sat quietly in the vehicle, and the scurrying squad also stayed inside. Because right now, protecting ourselves was the best way to maintain our combat strength. The tension weighed heavily on everyone. Everyone clearly understood how terrifying a spiritual-type monster was. If someone was controlled by it, especially the heavy gunners on the tanks, then the teammates next to them might be forced to shoot them dead immediately to prevent a wider disaster. It was a last resort order, but everyone understood. Sweat began to bead on many people's foreheads. No one knew if Shiyu had enough strength to protect them. The silence dragged on, seemingly endless. No one dared to speak. Everyone was in a state of extreme vigilance. Li Yuhan, who had just returned to the base vehicle, didn't dare say a word either. I knew she really wanted to be by her mother and grandfather's side to take care of them, but right now, she was afraid of distracting me. Time passed slowly, every minute and second feeling heavy. 15 minutes went by, and still nothing happened. Some people started to wonder if it was just a false alarm. But since Lin Yaoshan hadn't given the order, no one dared to relax. Half an hour passed, and the doubts grew. Spiritual abilities were inherently vague, and misperceptions weren't uncommon. Lin Yaoshan frowned, grabbed the walkie-talkie, and ordered the entire team to maintain a level 1 combat readiness state and prepare to retreat. We couldn't stay here forever. Maybe Shiyu was just too tense. Maybe it was just a scare. If we retreated safely, that would be the best outcome. In the base vehicle, many people sighed in relief and wiped their sweat. I still didn't leave the combat room, my eyes constantly scanning around. Shiyu also closed her eyes, continuing to search with her spiritual domain, even though it was draining her energy very quickly. Song Jiawen tugged lightly at her hot hazmat suit, smiling bitterly as she said that was really a scare to death just now. Professor Su spoke in a deep voice, saying that at least this trip had yielded valuable data on the mutation of zombies and monsters under the effects of radiation. Those documents absolutely had to be brought back to the Zhonghai safe zone. Too many people had sacrificed their lives. If there were no results, even he couldn't forgive himself. Song Jiawen nodded in agreement, but just as she finished speaking, the incident occurred. Almost in the blink of an eye, Song Jiawen, who was usually frail and weak, suddenly sprang up like a female leopard, lunging straight at Shiyu sitting on the sofa. Her hand raised, the cold glint of a syringe flashing in her palm, the needle aiming straight for Shiyu's throat. At this moment, Zhuiying was in the driver's seat, I was in the combat room, and Zhonghai was at the back of the vehicle. We had people on guard in 3 directions, but no one expected the danger to erupt from right inside the vehicle. The opponent's target wasn't me, but Shiyu. I realized it immediately, but no matter how fast my reflexes were, I couldn't react in time. In my hands was the AM sniper rifle, the barrel still pointing outside. There was no way to shoot immediately. Zhuiying and Zhonghai were even less able to react in time. Shiyu was a spiritual-type mutant. Her physique was only slightly better than an ordinary person's. Facing a bursting Song Jiawen, she had absolutely no advantage. A chilling thought flashed through my mind. She's already been controlled by the spiritual-type monster. Shiyu also immediately understood, her hands and feet turning ice-cold. That monster didn't just have intelligence, it was smart enough to realize that Shiyu was the biggest threat in the convoy. As long as it eliminated her, no one else could find its location. By then, the tanks and armored vehicles would all become weapons in its hands. All of us would just be living targets. In that life-and-death moment, Shiyu erupted with physical strength far beyond normal. She grabbed Song Jiawen's wrist, blocking the needle rushing towards her carotid artery. If that needle pierced her and injected air, she would die instantly. But just as Shiyu managed to hold the opponent's hand, an even more horrifying scene occurred. Song Jiawen's beautiful face twisted ferociously. Her mouth ripped open to the sides, revealing a bloody red interior. From where her tongue should have been, a sharp red proboscis shot out, aiming straight for Shiyu's forehead. Shiyu was sitting on the sofa, completely unable to stand up and dodge. The syringe was just a feint. The real fatal blow was that proboscis. No one knew what would happen if it pierced Shiyu's forehead, but it was highly likely her brain would be eaten instantly. If Shiyu died, the entire convoy would suffer catastrophic losses, perhaps even total annihilation. Time seemed to freeze. Zhuiying leaped from the driver's seat. I jumped down from the combat room, having already drawn my Type 54 pistol. Zhonghai rushed forward, his entire body emitting blue electricity. But it was all too late. Just as the proboscis was about to touch Shiyu's forehead, a soft body suddenly lunged forward, wedging itself right between the two of them. It was Li Yuhan. She didn't have the strength to push Song Jiawen away, but she used her own body as a shield. The sharp proboscis pierced deeply into Yuhan's back, slicing through flesh like a hot knife through butter, almost piercing straight into her lung. The intense pain made her dizzy, but she still mustered all her strength, trying to push Song Jiawen slightly off course. At that exact moment, Zhuiying arrived. Electricity burst forth even before she touched the opponent, forming an electric net that blasted Song Jiawen away. At the same time, Zhuiying lunged forward, the 3-edged military knife in her hand plunging straight into her body. Song Jiawen's body convulsed. The sharp proboscis had been severed and remained stuck inside Li Yuhan's body. Blood poured from the corner of her mouth, but a grotesque smile appeared on her face. Then, she slowly collapsed. Li Yuhan slumped into Shiyu's arms. Her hazmat suit and clothes were completely dyed red with blood. Yuhan! Yuhan! Seeing the blood spreading before her eyes, I saw Su Tong look as if all her strength had been drained in an instant. Li Yuhan was her only emotional pillar, and now, seeing that proboscis pierce her daughter's lung with her own eyes. As a biologist, she understood better than anyone what that meant in a radioactive environment with such terrible medical conditions. The shock was too great. Coupled with days of malnutrition, Su Tong couldn't take it anymore and collapsed on the spot. Su Guangkai also trembled, his face deathly pale. For a frail old man, this was almost a fatal blow. Quick, get the medicine. Where's the medicine? Even I was panicking. I had always had a good impression of Yuhan. Seeing my former classmate dying right here in my own base vehicle, my heart ached so much I could barely breathe. Zhu Ying rushed to the storage room, bringing out all kinds of medicine, from Yunnan Baiyao to antibiotics. But facing such a horrific wound, it all seemed meaningless. Yuhan's face was pale, her breathing ragged. Her severely damaged lung made every inhalation a torture. She tried to open her mouth to say something, but couldn't make a sound. Her gaze swept past her fainting mother and stopped on me. Her trembling hand twitched, pointing faintly towards Su Tong. I understood immediately. She wanted me to take care of her mother. Perhaps when she rushed out to shield Shiyu, Yuhan had already guessed the outcome. But saving Shiyu was also saving her mother and grandfather. If Shiyu died, the two of them probably wouldn't make it out of here alive either. Blood transfusion. We need a blood transfusion right now. Su Guangkai held Yuhan, old tears streaming down his face. With a wound like this, without a blood transfusion, she would die very quickly. But in a radioactive zone, a blood transfusion was practically a suicide mission. The radiation would destroy the blood cells. Neither the donor nor the recipient could take off their hazmat suits. The risk was too great. Take my blood. Yuhan and I are both type O, he said as he tried to take off his hazmat suit, but Shiyu immediately stopped him. Professor Su, please calm down. Something's not right. Having just been saved by Yuhan, Shiyu felt extremely guilty, but at the same time, she clearly sensed something abnormal. Her spiritual domain was still expanded. The sharp pain in her brain hadn't disappeared. It was even clearer. That only meant one thing. The spiritual type monster was still alive. Not only that, it had become unstable, unable to completely hide itself anymore. Shiyu's gaze stopped on Song Jianwen's corpse. The grotesque proboscis was gone. The body had returned to human form. Life hadn't completely faded, but her eyes were empty like a soulless husk. The soul was dead, the brain destroyed. The body had become a host for the spiritual type monster. Thinking of this, Shiyu shuddered. If she was only being controlled, Song Jianwen couldn't have grown that deformity. She had been completely possessed. Then, Shiyu suddenly turned to look at Yuhan. The sharp proboscis was still embedded deep in her back. What sent chills down everyone's spine was that around the proboscis, tiny red threads like capillaries were growing out, clinging tightly to Yuhan's body. The blood that had been gushing out had started to slow down, even stopping completely. What the hell is going on? I saw it too, my expression changing instantly. The proboscis wasn't just stuck in Yuhan's body, it was melting. It was like it was dissolving into blood, seeping deep into her body bit by bit. This is bad, Shiyu suddenly realized, her voice trembling. This monster is trying to take over Li Yuhan's body. Everything immediately pieced together in her mind. From the very beginning, the monster had discovered Shiyu's existence. It knew that facing this entire army head-on was a losing battle, so it quietly took over Song Jianwen's body, using her identity as a doctor to get close. Its ultimate target was Shiyu. If it possessed her, it would destroy her spirit, become stronger, perhaps even evolve. But the plan failed. It couldn't possess Shiyu and was forced to choose Yuhan. Without a host, it would die, so now it had no way back. Shiyu blamed herself for being too careless, too reliant on her spiritual domain. Even this ability hadn't detected the monster's infiltration. Only when its murderous intent was revealed did she feel the sharp pain in her brain. That also proved a terrifying fact. This monster's spiritual strength might even surpass hers. What do we do now? I frowned, looking at the proboscis that had almost completely merged into Yuhan's body. Pull it out, Zhu Ying asked in a low voice. I immediately shook my head. If we pull it out, the blood will gush out again. Yuhan will definitely die instantly. Even in a hospital, pulling a knife out of a wound requires extremely careful consideration, let alone here. There's no time left, Shiyu said decisively. This thing is about to completely seep into her body. More accurately, this isn't a proboscis, but the physical form of the spiritual type monster. It's highly likely this is its true body. I looked straight at Shiyu. Then do you have a way? From what I see, if it wants to possess Yuhan's body, it first has to fight for control. What if it loses? Shiyu froze, shaking her head reflexively, saying that was almost impossible. A spiritual type monster is many times stronger than an ordinary person. And Yuhan is severely injured right now, her spirit extremely weak. Even Shiyu, if she fell into that state, her consciousness would severely decline, making it hard to resist. I nodded, but continued. If you were attacked by it head-on, you might lose too. But right now you're fine. What if you use your spiritual domain to envelop Yuhan and use all your strength to suppress this monster? Those words made Shiyu's eyes light up. That's right. Yuhan is weakening, but this monster isn't in a good state either. It's still linking with her body. The unstable spiritual fluctuations from earlier were proof. Under these circumstances, maybe, she really could suppress it. Then, let me try, Shiyu said through gritted teeth. I knew her personality well. Saying she would try meant she would go all out, leaving no way back. Although Su Guangkai didn't fully understand what a spiritual ability was, hearing there was still hope to save his granddaughter, he immediately trembled with excitement. Miss Ren, as long as you can save Yuhan, this old life of mine is yours. Professor Su, Li Yuhan risked her life to save me. I will definitely do my best, Shiyu said, her voice full of guilt. She blamed herself for her spiritual ability not being strong enough to detect the monster's infiltration earlier. Shiyu, Li Yuhan didn't just save you. She saved all of us. I'm responsible for this too, for not protecting you well. I shook my head. Everything had completely exceeded my expectations. Ever since I got the base vehicle, I naively thought that as long as the vehicle was intact, everyone inside would be absolutely safe. But now I understood. In this post-apocalyptic world, there is no absolutely safe place. Su Guangkai was about to say something else, but right then, his body suddenly convulsed violently. His voice choked, his hands gripping the blood-stained armrest tightly, his whole body trembling before slowly collapsing. Professor Su. I panicked and caught him. Before we could even save Yuhan, now Professor Su was in trouble. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. I held him while vigilantly observing the surroundings, a terrifying thought constantly flashing through my mind. Could he also be controlled by the spiritual type monster? Zhu Ying, protect Shiyu. Get her away. We don't know what's happening to Professor Su yet. I ordered in a deep voice. A horrifying possibility flashed through my mind. What if he also grew that deformity? Could I bring myself to kill him? Not only was he Yuhan's grandfather, Professor Su was also a crucial scientist for the Zhonghai safe zone, holding countless important data. Su Guangkai's convulsions grew more violent, and right at that moment, Su Tong, who was unconscious on the sofa, suddenly opened her eyes. Her lips were deathly pale, sweat pouring down, her reaction almost identical to Professor Su's. Damn it! I immediately realized a terrifying possibility. The vitamin pills. When they were rescued, both were in a state of exhaustion, severely deficient in vitamins. I hadn't suspected anything when Song Jian gave them the pills, but now I understood. Those probably weren't vitamins, or they had been poisoned somehow. In the middle of a radioactive zone, medical conditions were practically zero. Yuhan was dying, and now Su Tong and Su Guangkai were also in critical condition. My mind went blank. The data. Su Guangkai gasped, his voice trembling. I understood immediately. He was talking about his research journals, the extremely precious data on radiation-mutated organisms. But no matter how important the data was, it couldn't compare to their lives. If they died, the value of that research would also drop significantly. A chill ran down my spine. This spiritual-type monster didn't just want to kill Shiyu. It also wanted to destroy all the research, wiping out every clue of its existence. Its intelligence was too terrifying. It had systematically deceived all of us. At this time, the military had left their armored vehicles. Through the walkie-talkie, they knew what was happening in the base vehicle. Lin Yaoshan personally got out and stood outside the door. Captain Jiang, what's going on? Don't open the door. I ordered coldly. In this situation, Letting outsiders onto the vehicle would only make things more dangerous. What if the monster slipped into the crowd? Prevention is better than cure. Shiyu, save Li Yuhan first. Zhuiying, keep an eye on the two professors. If they really mutate. I didn't finish the sentence, but Zhuiying understood. If that happened, there would be no other choice. I suddenly noticed Shiyu was using her spirit to envelop Su Tong and Su Guangkai. What are you doing? I'm suppressing their spirits, bringing their conscious activity down to the lowest level, almost like a deep sleep. At the same time, I'm compressing their brainstems, slowing down their autonomic nervous systems and metabolisms. This could be considered a form of forced hypnosis. Under Shiyu's suppression, the two of them gradually calmed down from their convulsions and fell into a deep sleep. I was secretly horrified. This ability didn't just suppress consciousness, it directly affected physiology. But this method can't save them, Shiyu continued, her voice heavy. It can only slow down the toxins. It's possible they'll die in their sleep. But right now, we have no other choice. After saying that, Shiyu gathered all her spiritual power, condensing it into a blinding white light that shone straight onto Li Yuhan's forehead. That light was so strong that Zhuiying and I could see it with our naked eyes. That was spiritual energy. After transferring all her power into Yuhan, Shiyu was almost completely drained, drenched in sweat. But she still gritted her teeth and held on. Wake up! Wake up! I could only pray in my heart. I saw Li Yuhan's eyelids flutter slightly, and then her breathing became erratic. At that moment, her spirit seemed to be pulled into another world, while I stood on the edge, as if peeking into a dream that didn't belong to me. In the vague perception transmitted back through the spiritual fluctuations, I saw her standing in the courtyard of a familiar school, Xinye Jinling High School. The class bell rang, and a stream of neatly uniformed students walked into the classrooms one after another. It was a refined uniform, with a Western flair, both serious and elegant, exactly what you'd expect from an elite private school in Jinling. The afternoon sun shone down the hallway, dazzlingly bright, illuminating the empty sports field with its lush green grass, white goalposts, basketball hoops, and the distant dormitories sparkling like gems in the sun. All those images echoed back into my mind, making me suddenly realize she was asking herself, is this just a dream? I felt her gaze stop on a teenage boy sitting next to her. It was the past me. I was wearing a crisp white shirt, my uniform neat, my desk piled high with books, but my backpack and shoes were plain. A poor kid who got into a school full of rich kids on a full scholarship and good grades. The sunlight shone on that side profile, his brow shining, his hand spinning a pen unconsciously. An ordinary, quiet image, so unfamiliar that I almost didn't recognize myself. I knew, in that dream, she was staring at me intently. Not the soldier driving the base vehicle, not the guy holding a sniper rifle amidst a horde of zombies, but a high school student pondering a math problem. But then other images overlapped, apocalyptic memories intruding. Me holding a gun, me driving a vehicle through zombies, me pulling her back from death's door. Those images blended together, making even me unable to tell what was a dream and what was real. I heard my own voice from the past, the words I had said to her before the apocalypse hit. Next Tuesday, stay home, lock the door, and wait for me. Those words echoed in the quiet classroom, like a warning transcending time. At that exact moment, I felt her panic, because she remembered. This wasn't a dream. The scene immediately collapsed. The school vanished, the sports field shattered, replaced by a blood-soaked battlefield. Gunfire, the smell of gunpowder, the stench of blood, the screams of the living and the undead mixed together. The Zhonghai safe zone appeared in chaos. The sturdy walls crumbled, zombies flooding in like a raging tide. In that stream of spiritual fluctuations, I saw Li Yuhan wearing a white lab coat, covered in blood, standing on the battlefield as a military doctor. The scalpel in her hand was cold and practiced, as if it had become a part of her body. She performed surgery, excising virus-infected tissue, saving lives in impossible conditions. I realized that in that dream, she had grown up, becoming a different person, stronger, more decisive. But then, the face of the patient on the operating table distorted. A commander shrank down, turning into a little girl with a grotesque smile, the zombie that had attacked the ambulance. Her fear exploded, her spirit fluctuating violently, dragging me into that shockwave as well. Wake up! I practically roared in reality, calling out while using my spirit to shake her. Li Yuhan, wake up! It's all just a dream. Finally, the chaotic images began to disintegrate. The battlefield faded, the operating room vanished. Before my eyes, her eyes slowly opened, her gaze weak but focused. She looked at me, as if truly seeing me for the first time. Jiang. Her voice was hoarse, so we could almost melt it into the air. My heart clenched. She was awake. At least, her spirit had returned. The moment Li Yuhan woke up, I knew she remembered everything. Her eyes were no longer hazy, but carried a very real trace of panic, like someone who had just escaped from a dream that was far too long. I heard her breathe softly, then felt her spiritual fluctuations slowly stabilize. Later I learned that while her consciousness was submerged, she had wondered if she accepted the dream as reality, would she be trapped in it forever? Just like the vegetative patients she had seen during her hospital internship. A person lying motionless for years, relying on machines to sustain life. Who could say for sure they weren't imprisoned in an inescapable nightmare? Just thinking about it was enough to make anyone shudder. Seeing Li Yuhan fully open her eyes, I finally breathed a real sigh of relief. Jiang, she whispered. I immediately leaned down, getting close. I'm here. Whatever it is, just say it. Her weak breath brushed past my ear, very light. You woke me up. Thank you. I froze for a moment, then instinctively turned to look at Ren Shiyu. Actually, the one who pulled her out of the dream wasn't me, but Shiyu. She was exhausted, her face pale, her gray eyes noticeably dimmer from consuming too much spiritual power. Shiyu just shook her head slightly, signaling not to explain. I understood and didn't say anything more. Li Yuhan seemed to have recalled what happened before she passed out. Seeing you're okay, I'm relieved, she said, a very genuine sense of relief in her voice. The first thing she saw when she opened her eyes was me. That put her at ease, because if I was still standing here, it meant the spiritual monster had been destroyed. But right after, she remembered Song Jiawen, and her nose stung. That damn monster. And Song Jiawen was just an innocent victim. Where are my grandpa and mom? She asked urgently. They must be so worried. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked straight at her. Yuhan, how does your body feel? She paused. Very quickly, she remembered she had been pierced through the back, piercing her chest. As a doctor, she understood better than anyone how severe that wound was. Even in peacetime, with proper surgical facilities, the survival rate would be very low, let alone in the current situation. But she didn't feel any pain. She tremblingly reached up to touch her chest, then struggled to sit up. There was still dark blood on her shirt, but the wound that should have pierced her lung had stopped bleeding. There was even a distinct itching sensation, like the flesh was knitting itself back together. No surgery, no blood transfusion, no foredrip, just a simple gauze pad. This completely defied conventional medicine. I clearly saw the confusion in her eyes. The truth was, while she was unconscious, we had witnessed that wound heal at a terrifying speed with our own eyes. Especially when her consciousness sank deep into the dream, the regeneration speed was even faster. Zhu Ying had checked and confirmed that not only had the bleeding stopped, but the flesh had begun to close. Even I, after activating my evolutionary bloodline, couldn't heal at such a speed. Only one question remained in my mind. After the spiritual monster's spirit was destroyed inside Li Yuhan's body, how much had she changed? To say nothing had changed was almost impossible. The spiritual monster failed to devour her, so was it possible she had devoured it instead? If so, she might have inherited a portion of its abilities, at least the spiritual ones. This was the first case like this I had encountered. There was absolutely no precedent to refer to. Yuhan, listen to me. I told her the whole story of how the spiritual monster tried to take over her body after leaving Song Jiawen. The story was terrifying, but she only paled for a moment and listened quietly to the end. When she heard how Shiyu had risked her life to save her, she turned to look at her, her eyes full of gratitude. Do you feel anything different about your body now? I asked. She was silent for a moment. Then she shook her head. No, just a little dizzy and weak. I nodded. With her spirit almost devoured, losing blood, and being severely injured, that feeling was completely normal. Can you sense our emotions? Or hear anything unusual? Shiyu asked further. Li Yuhan tried to focus for a moment, then shook her head again. She looked a bit disappointed and clenched her fists, but her strength was the same as before. There were no obvious changes. Don't rush, Shiyu said, her voice weaker than before. Your case is very special. Even if there are no changes, just surviving is a good thing. I nodded, agreeing with her words. But deep down, I still had an indescribable feeling. I always felt that something about Li Yuhan had changed. It just hadn't manifested yet. Where are my grandpa and mom? Li Yuhan asked again, her voice trembling slightly. Actually, since waking up, she had vaguely sensed something was wrong. My reaction and everyone else's were abnormal. Furthermore, when I recounted what happened, I subconsciously avoided mentioning Su Tong and Su Guangkai. Even Zhu Ying, who was usually the most straightforward, didn't know how to bring it up. Let me tell you. I exhaled softly, looking straight at her. Yuhan. Hearing me say they were injured, Li Yuhan looked as if she had been struck by lightning, standing frozen in place. Her eyes were wide open, but her gaze was empty, as if she couldn't process the truth. The spiritual monster had been destroyed, so how could this still happen? In the apocalypse, what made her feel luckiest was that she still had her family. No matter what, they were her last pillar of support. For them, she was willing to sacrifice herself. But now, just after waking up, the news she received was that the most important people in her life were lying motionless on the brink of death. Ren Shiyu put them into a deep sleep. I continued. But even I'm not sure if, in their current condition, they can hold on until we get back to the Zhonghai safe zone. Knowing the two crucial scientists had collapsed, and Li Yuhan had just narrowly escaped death, Lin Yaoshan and the entire military fell into a state of extreme tension. But tension wouldn't change anything. Lin Yaoshan accepted my plan, ordering his men to keep their distance from the bus and maintain a perimeter. He stood far away, constantly looking towards the vehicle, wanting to know what was happening inside. The walkie-talkie crackled with Zhu Ying's voice. Li Yuhan is awake. Lin Yaoshan immediately asked, what about the two scientists? They're still unconscious. His heart sank. The atmosphere among the troops grew heavy as well. If something happened to the two scientists, this mission would be a complete failure. It was all caused by that spiritual monster. In his anger and helplessness, Lin Yaoshan punched the armored vehicle hard. The pain in his hand brought him back to his senses. Prepare to move out. We must return to Zhonghai as fast as possible. Maybe there's still hope. Inside the bus, Li Yuhan stood dazed for a few seconds after hearing what I said. As a doctor, she understood very well what this meant. It was truly impossible to guard against. Who could have expected that monster to be so smart as to use vitamin pills as a disguise to poison them? Even before the apocalypse, poisoning took many lives, let alone in this completely mutated world. She felt her heart empty out, like she was slowly sinking into freezing water. My mom. My grandpa. Where are they? She said, her voice so thin I wasn't sure if I heard it clearly. As soon as she spoke, she tried to stand up, but her body was still too weak. The moment she moved, she stumbled forward. I quickly reached out and caught her, grabbing her wrist, clearly feeling her trembling and icy coldness. I understood her feelings right now better than anyone. Su Tong and Su Guangkai were lying in two different places, one on the bed, one on the sofa. The bed and sofa were soft and warm, which only highlighted their deathly pale skin. Their eyes were closed, only their weak breathing proving that their lives hadn't completely faded. Li Yuhan walked over, knelt down beside them, and held their hands. If they returned to the Zhonghai safe zone, could they be saved? A faint glimmer of hope flashed in her heart, so faint that even she didn't dare to believe it. The walkie-talkie rang with Lin Yaoshan's decisive order. Move out. The convoy quickly left the residential area near the nuclear power plant and rushed onto the main road. The roar of machine guns echoed again, streams of bullets tearing through the wind, reflecting the anxiety and urgency in everyone's hearts. Zhu Ying silently stepped on the gas, with only one thought in mind. We have to get back as fast as possible. Li Yuhan no longer paid attention to what was happening outside. She just sat there, quietly holding her mother and grandfather's hands. Su Tong's hands had become rough, while Su Guangkai's hands were like dry branches. Those hands used to be old but strong, yet now they were so weak it broke one's heart. She gently squeezed his hand, feeling his breathing grow weaker, like a candle of life about to go out. But as a family member, she couldn't do anything. Right at that moment, she suddenly felt something different. A heartbeat? She seemed to hear his heartbeat. The skin on Su Guangkai's hand seemed to become transparent. Before her eyes, his blood vessels, internal organs, and weakly beating heart appeared. His entire body seemed to be covered by a layer of black mist. That mist was wrapping tightly around his heart, suffocating every beat. The sight made her shudder, her heart clenching. She looked over at Su Tong in panic and saw the same condition. She didn't understand what was happening, but she clearly felt that their lives were being swallowed by those streams of black mist. The more anxious she got, the blurrier her vision became. The scenery around her suddenly changed. She found herself standing in an operating room, a scalpel in her hand, an operating table in front of her. This scene, she had seen it before. In the dream earlier. Was it a dream or reality? Or had she never woken up? She looked at the scalpel in her hand, sharp and terrifyingly real. Then she looked at the person lying on the operating table, and her whole body froze. It wasn't a stranger, but her grandfather. Turning to the side, her mother was also lying on another operating table, her eyes tightly closed. The operating room was sealed tight, with only the three of them. The cold, mechanical sounds echoed steadily, drops of water falling with a tick-tock, creating a suffocating silence. Everything was too real. She held his hand, the sensation so genuine she couldn't tell the difference. In that haze, Li Yuhan gradually calmed down. Right now, she was a doctor, and in front of her was her family. She had chosen this path to save people. And at this moment, there was only one thing she wanted to do: save her mother and grandfather. The roar of the vehicle engines mixed with the savage howls of the zombie horde and heavy crashing sounds. The convoy sped down the road, gunfire erupting continuously. Looking at the wildly overgrown rice fields on both sides of the road, interspersed with a few low houses, an indescribably gloomy feeling rose in my heart. Even though that spiritual monster was just a radiation mutation, what it had done left a heavy psychological shadow on everyone. We had guns, artillery, mutants, the military, and had even built the Zhonghai safe zone. Many people once thought that no matter how cruel the apocalypse was, humanity could still survive. But right now, after experiencing what just happened, many people in the military felt exactly like they did in the early days of the outbreak. I clenched my fists. This kind of spiritual monster was truly impossible to guard against. Full speed ahead. Don't stop to fight. After regrouping with the stay-behind team, move out immediately. Do not waste a single second. Lin Yaoshan's shouts constantly echoed over the walkie-talkie. I turned to look at Li Yuhan. Right now, she was probably the most anxious person. But as soon as I turned my head, I suddenly realized something was wrong. Su Guangkai's eyelids seemed to have just twitched. Right at that moment, Rin Xiu suddenly turned around and said that their spirits seemed to be recovering. I froze. Could they be waking up? With the lack of medicine, and not even knowing for sure if they were poisoned, Xiu could only put them into a deep coma. How could they wake up on their own? Even she couldn't understand it. Then she looked at Li Yuhan, slightly surprised, and said that Yuhan's spirit was showing abnormal fluctuations. Yuhan's spiritual fluctuations weren't strong, and because Xiu was always on guard against external threats, she only noticed when she shifted her attention to her. I heard Xiu speculate that after devouring that spiritual monster, Yuhan might have inherited a portion of its spiritual abilities. Speaking of this, she couldn't hide her worry, afraid that Yuhan was unconsciously affecting the two professors. But right at that moment, I saw Yuhan tightly holding Su Guangkai and Su Tong's hands, her eyes half closed, her face pale, her eyelashes trembling slightly. Looking at that expression, I knew she was extremely focused, as if she had completely sunk into another world. I hesitated for a moment, then spoke up, telling everyone not to disturb her. Given the two professors' condition, even if they were affected spiritually, they couldn't wake up immediately. But now they were actually showing signs of waking up. Minutes ticked by. Then suddenly, Yuhan opened her eyes. Looking at the scene in front of her, she stared blankly for a moment before collapsing limply. She muttered that it was like a dream, but not entirely a dream. In that dream, she had performed a long surgery, removing all the black mist. When she returned to the bus, she no longer saw the black mist on Su Guangkai and Su Tong. It was both a dream and reality, making her unable to tell the difference. I called her name, and Yuhan snapped back to reality, only then realizing everyone was looking at her. I turned to look at the two professors and couldn't help but be amazed. The previously purplish-blue complexion had returned to normal. Even the gauntness from malnutrition and lack of rest had disappeared. Their faces were rosy, their breathing steady. They looked more like they were sound asleep than in a coma. Jiang Zhuing noticed it too, unable to hide her surprise. Yuhan smiled, saying to let them sleep a little longer. Then she looked at her mother and grandfather, saying they had been too exhausted these past few days. An indescribable peace appeared on her face, because she had been in despair, never expecting such an outcome. Everyone lowered their voices, while Yuhan recounted what had happened, saying she herself didn't understand what that dream was all about. Shiyu rested her chin in her hand, thinking, then said it was probably Yuhan's spiritual world, similar to her own spiritual domain. Yuhan suddenly understood, a happy smile mixed with a bit of shyness on her face, saying that because she had just gained this ability, she still didn't fully understand it. I said that based on her description, this ability probably wasn't just for healing, but healing suited her best. Yuhan smiled, saying that just this was enough to make her very happy. Compared to becoming strong, she only needed to be able to protect and heal her family and friends. That had been her dream since before the apocalypse. Because that feeling of helplessness when she couldn't do anything, she never wanted to experience it again. I nodded, looking at her smile and feeling happy for her. Zhuiying also agreed, while Shiyu explained that since Yuhan was a new mutant, both her spirit and body needed to train and evolve further. Yuhan smiled. She knew mutants needed to eat a lot of mutant beast meat to evolve. As for spiritual training, she could ask Shiyu later. Suddenly, Yuhan seriously expressed her gratitude. She stood up and bowed, but almost fell and was caught by me just in time. She looked up at me, her eyes full of gratitude, saying she truly thanked everyone, because her entire family's lives were saved by the Shuriying squad. Right at that moment, Lin Yaoshan's voice rang out over the walkie-talkie again, hoarse but still strong, urging us to fire at will and speed up. I was startled and quickly picked up the walkie-talkie to report that the two professors were fine. The other end went dead silent. I repeated it once more. My voice was as calm as always, but to Lin Yaoshan, it was the most wonderful sound at this moment. The two professors were fine. All the soldiers and survivors breathed a sigh of relief. That meant the recent sacrifices weren't in vain. Our mission hadn't failed, and countless research results, experimental samples, and notes would be brought back to Zhonghai to prove their worth. The convoy continued forward and quickly arrived at the location where the main army was camped. As soon as we stopped, Wang Shishir hurried out to greet us. She had been busy all day, barely having time to sit and rest. On one hand, she was anxious to know how Li Yuhan's family was doing. On the other hand, she wanted to take the opportunity to complain a bit to Yuhan, because Yuhan was gentle and would definitely comfort her. What? So many things happened. Does that mean, Yuhan, you've become a mutant too? Wang Shishir was shocked, a complex look flashing in her eyes. Leaving the safe zone this time and stepping into the outside world, she had truly been terrified by the cruelty of the apocalypse. This was also the first time she realized her brother, Wang Jinlan, wasn't always invincible like she thought, and how difficult it was to rely on oneself to survive. Initially, she thought her situation and Yuhan's were the same. She didn't expect Yuhan to escape death and even become a mutant, although this wasn't something to be jealous of. Sure, Yuhan suddenly spoke up. Huh? Sure snapped out of her daze. Sure, I was thinking, I have to use this ability to make myself more useful. Use it? Yeah, that's right. Sure nodded, stayed silent for a moment, then continued. You've been through too much today, you still look very weak. You should go rest. It's fine, the army will probably stay here for a while. Alright, how are you today? Yuhan asked. Sure pursed her lips, then shook her head, offering a faint smile. I'm fine. Yuhan looked at her for a moment, feeling in her heart that Sure was somehow different from before. The harsh environment and her brother getting injured had made her mature a lot. The mutant beast meat stew is ready. Eat up. As soon as they returned to the vehicle, Rin Xiu brought out a full pot of mutant meat. The aroma filled the air. Yuhan sat down, watching Jiang Zhuiying scoop a bowl of meat and place it in front of her. The tender pieces of meat made her feel undeniably hungry. I picked up some greens for her, telling her that after eating, the feeling of weakness would quickly disappear. Yuhan looked at the bowl of meat and greens in front of her, then looked around at the people in the vehicle, including Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan, who had just gotten on. In the not-so-spacious interior of the minibus, it was crowded but not stuffy. On the contrary, it made her feel warm and safe. After a moment of silence, Yuhan smiled. I can't just eat your food for free. I want to ask, do you guys need to hire an underqualified intern doctor? As she spoke, she tilted her head slightly, the ends of her hair swaying gently. That clean, sweet look made me freeze for a split second, as if I had gone back to high school. I stayed silent for a moment, then nodded, saying as long as she didn't demand a high salary, she was welcome. Shiyu watched this scene and smiled, standing up to say she would go stir-fry a few more dishes to celebrate together. Not long after, Su Guangkai and Su Tong also woke up. The two had been poisoned by the spiritual monster, but after a deep sleep, not only were they fine, they were brimming with vitality. Their previous deficiencies seemed to have been completely made up for. Seeing Yuhan safe and sound, both couldn't hold back tears of joy. Yuhan had to recount the whole story one more time. Grandpa, I've decided to stay with the Shuriying squad. My ability needs training, and I think they also need a doctor, Yuhan said. Su Guangkai and Su Tong looked at each other, a clear look of worry and reluctance on Su Tong's face. Because the Shuriying squad was a survivor team, sooner or later they would have to go outside. But she also understood that although her daughter looked gentle, once she made a decision, she wouldn't hesitate. Yuhan wanted to join the Shuriying squad not just to train herself, but also because I had helped her family so much. Su Tong understood all of this clearly. Speaking of safety, there was no truly safe place left in this world. Grasping the power to survive on your own was the most important thing. I'm not as smart as you and Mom, but I also want to walk on my own 2 feet and do what I can, Yuhan continued. Su Guangkai looked deeply at his granddaughter, then walked up to me and held out his hand. I looked up, unable to help but be surprised by the old but resolute face. My granddaughter, I leave her to you. You two must help each other. I froze for a second, then firmly grasped his hand. An indescribable feeling rose in my heart. This wasn't an easy decision, but in these circumstances, that entrustment carried a special weight. I seriously replied that I would do it. Right at that moment, Zhuiying suddenly muttered softly, "So the vehicle is getting even more crowded?" Before she could finish, I lightly knocked her on the head. Stop causing trouble. The 2 scientists waking up boosted the morale of the entire army. After personally checking their condition, Lin Yaoshan finally breathed a sigh of relief. Even though they no longer had to race against the clock to get back to Zhonghai, to avoid any unexpected variables, he still decided to set off early. Zhonghai, although still far away, the sound of artillery could vaguely be heard. I stood on the roof of the vehicle looking into the distance, seeing the zombie horde flooding the streets like a black sea. The sight made my scalp tingle. This was a sense of threat stemming from instinct. Even mutants couldn't avoid it. The convoy followed the safe route back. The number of zombies on the road was less than in the city, but dried bloodstains were scattered everywhere. Waves of zombies continued to appear. After hours of intense fighting, we finally entered the Zhonghai safe zone area. However, just looking from a distance, a heavy shock slammed straight into everyone's hearts. The sturdy city wall, like a giant black dragon, was now billowing with thick black smoke. The ground in front of the wall was heavily devastated, zombie corpses piled high at the base of the wall. What happened? No one dared to believe their eyes. With the Zhonghai safe zone's firepower, no matter how frantically the zombies attacked, they shouldn't have been able to easily breach the wall. And accompanying that shock was a heavy fear, pressing down like a giant boulder in everyone's hearts. Looking from afar, some couldn't help but wonder, could Zhonghai have already been breached by the zombies? The convoy slowly entered the Zhonghai 1 area. Along the way, zombie corpses littered the ground like a thick carpet. The wheels constantly crushed over those bodies, the vehicle occasionally swaying from running over corpses that weren't fully mangled yet. Even without intentionally looking outside, I still saw corpses everywhere. Some were shot through, some had their limbs blown apart by artillery. The sight sent chills down one's spine. As we approached the city wall, the scene before us finally made everyone breathe a sigh of relief. On the watchtowers were heavy artillery and machine guns, packed with soldiers. The high wall bristled with dark gun barrels pointing outward. The convoy stopped in front of the city gate. The thick alloy iron gate was heavily guarded by heavily armed sentries. Lin Yaoshan had someone shout a few words, and the gate slowly opened. The minibus followed the convoy inside. I looked to both sides and saw soldiers standing guard everywhere, but at the same time, there were many wounded people lying on the ground leaning against the walls, groaning in pain, covered in blood. There was a soldier lying very close, clutching his leg tightly, his face pale, cold sweat pouring down constantly. His leg was pierced through, the white bone exposed. Just looking at it was enough to make you feel the pain. I also saw quite a few corpses already covered with white cloths. Li Yuhan anxiously asked what exactly had happened. Lin Yaoshan couldn't wait any longer. He immediately got out of the vehicle, called an officer over to ask about the situation, and then left with that person. It was a long while before he returned. While waiting, soldiers and officers conducted routine infection checks. Lin Yaoshan told the two professors that a vehicle had been prepared to take them back to the safe zone for a health check. Su Tong looked around, anxiously asking if something major had happened. But Lin Yaoshan only replied that the safe zone wasn't in serious danger, and Zhonghai 1 hadn't suffered too many losses, so the checkup would be very safe. He urged everyone to quickly get in the vehicle. The survivors from the radioactive zone would also go along. Su Tong nodded, helping Su Guangkai out of the vehicle with Li Yuhan. Before leaving, Yuhan said she would take her mother and grandfather for the checkup and return soon. I have to go home to get some clothes and pack my things. I nodded, seeing them off, while observing the surroundings of Zhonghai 1. The once bustling streets were now just a chaotic mess. Corpses and wounded people lay everywhere. Not only soldiers, but many survivors were also injured. The scene looked exactly like a town that had just experienced a frantic zombie attack. This was completely unlike what Lin Yaoshan said about the damage not being major. Because if the zombies had breached the wall, the guards should have been the front line. How could they have let them penetrate so deep into the streets and kill so many people? Just as I was thinking, Lin Yaoshan suddenly called me over, saying General Zhang wanted to see me. He didn't look happy, but clearly not because of me. Perhaps what he heard from that officer was extremely bad. I wanted to ask more, but seeing him in a hurry, I only had time to say goodbye before getting in the vehicle and leaving. Guided by someone, the minibus drove towards General Zhang's military office area. Along the way, I saw similar scenes to those at the city gate. Some places looked like they had just been bombed, with houses even collapsed. Zhonghai 1 had many mutants, but there were even more ordinary people, and these people had almost no ability to defend themselves. On the road, I also vaguely heard people talking about monsters, making me suspect that a creature similar to the water monster we encountered before might have appeared, causing this tragedy. The military office area was located inside the safe zone, but separated from the villa area. The vehicle stopped in front of an ancient courtyard, completely contrasting with the chaos outside, bringing a strange sense of tranquility. The soldier driving said this was the military commission office. I thanked him and got out with Renshiyu. Inside, the courtyard was very spacious. We followed the soldier to an office door. As soon as we arrived, we clearly felt a tense atmosphere shattering the earlier tranquility. Inside the room, several officers were standing, listening to General Zhang's instructions. The general, who always gave me a hearty impression, now looked grave, his brows tightly furrowed, his whole body exuding a heavy aura, as if he were in the middle of a battlefield. When the officers left, the soldier reported that he had brought us. General Zhang was looking down at some documents, one hand resting on the desk. When he looked up, the exhaustion and signs of aging were clearly visible. But when he saw me and Renshiyu, he still offered a faint smile, saying we were the great heroes, bringing him the rare good news of these past few days. Because the news of the professor's safety had quickly been reported to the military commission, and their safety was an extremely crucial issue for Zhonghai. He invited us to sit down and asked if we wanted tea. But I couldn't wait, directly asking what exactly had happened to Zhonghai. The atmosphere here made me feel like I was before a massive storm. General Zhang put down the teapot, saying that Zhonghai had indeed encountered a major crisis. The scale of the zombie waves recently was getting larger and larger. Ren Xiu bit her lip, saying that no matter how large the scale, they couldn't attack the inside of the city because the defense system here was too strong. General Zhang confirmed that, when building the safe zone and Zhonghai won, they had considered every possibility. With comprehensive firepower coverage, monsters from the outside couldn't break the defense line. But he continued in a deep voice. What they didn't expect was that early yesterday morning, a new type of monster suddenly appeared from beneath Zhonghai 1. Giant worms. The small ones were the size of an adult's arm, the large ones as big as pythons. A total of hundreds of them surfaced, causing severe damage. At the same time, the zombies launched their largest attack ever. Speaking of this, his voice became heavier than ever, frankly admitting that Zhonghai was currently in an extremely dangerous situation, because there were still many such monsters underground. The giant worms surfacing from underground were indeed an unpredictable threat. Whether it was Zhonghai 1 or the safe zone, both had many green areas with loose soil, making it almost impossible to form a barrier strong enough to stop them. Zhonghai 1 was located on the outskirts of the safe zone, surrounded by agricultural fields, making the threat level even more severe. The endless waves of zombies brought more and more monsters, making the situation increasingly tense. Right now we are still trying to find a solution. The Research Institute, the military, and all the surviving residents in Zhonghai are joining forces. If the Zhonghai safe zone can't hold out, this wave of zombies could swallow tens of thousands of people in an instant, General Zhang said in a deep voice. At this moment, everyone was fighting just to survive. The appearance of zombies had forced people to abandon cities and seek shelter in safe zones. But if even those safe zones couldn't be held, where else could they run? It wasn't hard to understand why General Zhang looked so troubled. In just the short time since we last met, I felt he had aged several years. We will actively deal with this. These damn monsters want to eat us, but let's see if they choke to death. I'm old. I've lived long enough. I'm not afraid of them anymore. A flash of murderous intent and anger sparked in General Zhang's eyes. Then he turned to look at me. Captain Jiang, I want to ask you a favor. I replied seriously. General, please speak. I knew he didn't call me here just to inform me of the situation. Right now the situation is changing by the day. Recently, giant worm monsters have appeared near the Research Institute, causing massive panic. We are concerned there are still other hidden dangers, so we've decided to relocate the Research Institute. Hearing this, I frowned slightly. The Research Institute was the most important center of the safe zone. Giant worms appearing near it was indeed enough to terrify everyone. The decision to relocate in this situation was understandable. But relocate where? Ren Xiu asked. General Zhang replied that besides Zhonghai, there were many other safe zones. They had communicated and shared research results previously. After consideration and consulting the scientists, the Jinling base and the Xingqing base city were deemed the most suitable. A portion of the scientists would be transferred to Xingqing, but the distance was too far. Therefore, he hoped our squad could take on the escort mission. When he said this, his eyes looked at me with deep solemnity, a clear expectation in the depths of his gaze. This mission carried immense risks, because the distance to Xingqing was too far. Before the apocalypse, it took 6 hours by train or 12 hours by car from Zhonghai to Xingqing. But after the apocalypse, 12 hours by car meant many days traveling on the road, passing through countless zombie hordes and all kinds of dangers. Mobilizing a large-scale military force would attract the zombies' attention, but sending only a small squad would make the military uneasy. Under these circumstances, General Zhang thought of me, especially after hearing the report about us rescuing the 2 Professor Seuss. He believed that the Shuriying squad could handle this mission. But I wasn't part of the military. He couldn't give me orders, he could only wait for me to agree voluntarily. I pondered for a long time. I respected the scientists, but if the risks exceeded the limit, not only would my squad be in danger, but the scientists would also fall into peril. Zhonghai was currently full of dangers, Staying here might not be safe, and I couldn't hide in the base vehicle forever. If Zhonghai was truly breached by the zombie wave, I would have nowhere to go either. Compared to this place, the Xingqing base, although its situation was unclear, was at least considered safer. Otherwise, they wouldn't have decided to transfer them there. After some consideration, I looked up. I need the payment up front. To make such a long trip, I have to complete the modifications on my base vehicle. Currently, I only had one mutant crystal core, while the vehicle was only equipped with level 1 armor. The living space had been improved, and it had an air cannon and a ramming bumper in the combat room. But when facing massive zombie hordes or giant monsters, that still wasn't enough. What do you need? General Zhang asked directly. I said I needed mutant crystal cores and some special materials, things only the military had a supply of. I especially hoped for a level 2 crystal core, even though I knew they were extremely rare. And General Zhang could only promise to try his best. Before we left, General Zhang turned to Rin Xiu, saying she had played an incredibly important role in this mission. He had promised to help her find her younger sister studying in Yuhang, but with the current crisis in Zhonghai, it couldn't be done immediately. However, on the way to Xingqing, we would pass through Yuhang, and the accompanying team would include an officer who had escorted survivors from there to Zhonghai. He would arrange for them to assist in the search. Xiu nodded in understanding. In this situation, what General Zhang had done for her was already a lot. Leaving the office, Xiu and I unexpectedly ran into an old man walking towards us. His hair was pure white, his eyes cold and decisive. When he saw me, his footsteps paused for a split second before he continued walking straight ahead. Chu Zhongshan. That name immediately popped into my head. Xiu also frowned. She clearly felt a very bad vibe from this old man, showing neither joy nor anger. Even when facing the enemy who killed his son, Chu Zhongshan walked away calmly. I shook my head. I told Xiu to ignore him. Zhonghai was now in chaos, and we were about to leave. No matter how deep his hatred was, it was meaningless now. After leaving the military commission office, I drove everyone back to the apartment. Along the way, there were traces of blood and battle everywhere. It was clear many areas had been ravaged by the giant worms. Even though the corpses had been cleared, there were still survivors sitting on both sides of the road, holding weapons. Some still had blood on their heads, their eyes empty, as if they hadn't processed what had just happened. It was hard to adapt. They hadn't been in Zhonghai 1 for long. Just as they were enjoying a brief moment of peace, they had to face absolute terror. This sudden change truly made it impossible for many to accept. The minibus continued towards the residential area. Passing by the coffee shop, I saw the doors tightly shut. I couldn't help but think of my old classmate, Li Qingwei. But with the current chaotic situation, finding him wouldn't be easy, and time didn't allow it. More importantly, staying here was probably safer than leaving, because the road ahead was too dangerous. Even I had to maintain high vigilance to deal with any situation. Arriving back at the residential area, Jiang Zhuiying, Rin Xiu, and Zhonghai went upstairs to pack their things, while Zhuiying sat in the driver's seat. I sat in the cabin, calling up the star seed in my mind. On the screen, the current specs of the base vehicle were clearly displayed. Vehicle type, standard base vehicle. Form 1, minibus. Form 2, mining truck. Spatial configuration, upgraded bedroom X1, kitchen X1, bathroom X1, small living room X1, primary combat room X1. Equipped weapons, primary air cannon and primary ramming bumper. Vehicle shell, level 1 special alloy. Overall protection level, D. Compared to the first upgrade, this vehicle was much stronger. But after the confrontation with the spiritual monster in the radioactive zone, I realized it still had quite a few shortcomings. I opened the base vehicle's evolution interface, skimmed past the unnecessary items, and focused on 3 important options: adding a fuel-powered flamethrower weapon, equipping a radar for the base vehicle, and upgrading the combat room. Radar used to be something I valued highly, because combined with infrared scanning, it could help detect danger early. Extremely useful in the apocalypse. But this thing was too expensive, requiring a level 2 mutant crystal core to activate. Before the apocalypse, radar on an armored vehicle was something I never dared to dream of. And now, even if the military sold it, the price would be unbelievably high. Currently, with Rin Xiu acting like a living radar who could sense accurately within a certain range, I didn't need a radar that much anymore. The remaining two options were adding a weapon and upgrading the combat room. Both made me hesitate. The current combat room only fit one person, and its functions were quite limited. But upgrading it was incredibly expensive. The initial activation only required one crystal core, but the next upgrade required 3. I had once spent 18 crystal cores to completely modify the vehicle, in exchange for a massive increase in durability for both forms. But the combat room was just a small space, yet it needed 3 crystal cores and special alloys. Even so, I knew upgrading the combat room was very necessary. Because Zhuiying had gotten much stronger, but the space inside the vehicle was too narrow, preventing her from fully utilizing her power. Her longsword and electrical abilities were almost completely restricted inside the cabin. If Zhuiying could use the combat room, she would no longer be limited. And I didn't want her to just live under my protection. With that talent, she needed to grow and become strong enough to protect herself. Thinking of this, I didn't hesitate anymore and confirmed the combat room upgrade. As for the flamethrower, the air cannon took too long to reload. In a situation where we needed to break through a zombie horde, it was almost useless. The flamethrower only needed one level 1 mutant crystal core, not too expensive, but it consumed a lot of fuel, making it costly to use. Next was the plan to upgrade the mining truck. I mainly used this form for ramming, so I focused on 2 factors, speed and ramming capability. The truck wasn't fast to begin with, but when activating acceleration and ramming straight ahead, the speed would increase significantly, though still far inferior to the minibus. Thinking about this, just planning it out gave me a headache, because everything required crystal cores. After packing up, Zhuiying and Shiyu returned to the base vehicle, started cooking, and rested. Meanwhile, Zhonghai and Sun Kuan checked the military vehicles. Tonight, we decided to sleep in the base vehicle, because with the threat of giant worms, staying in the apartment wasn't necessarily safe. Night fell. From afar, the flickering firelight on the city wall could be seen, along with the endless gunfire and the savage howls of the zombie horde. At first, those sounds made everyone uneasy. I spoke softly, telling them to just sleep and not worry. Shiyu gently pulled up her blanket and closed her eyes. In this apocalyptic world, as long as she was in this minibus, she felt safe. Zhuiying also quietly pulled up her blanket, but right then, I spoke up, telling her to take off her earphones and not stay up late watching anime. Zhuiying looked like she'd been caught red-handed, her eyes widening as she awkwardly stuck out her tongue and replied, "Yes." That night passed, seemingly endless. Early the next morning, there was a knock on the vehicle door. When the door opened, Li Yuhan stood outside, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, a youthful baseball cap on her head, a backpack on her back, and carrying a large bag in her hand. Jiang Zhuiying poked her head out of the bathroom, a toothbrush still in her mouth, smiling and saying good morning, teasing that she looked dressed for a vacation. Yuhan just smiled in response. I was looking down at the map, then looked up at her, knowing full well in my heart. In just one short night, with Yuhan's personality, she must have arranged everything before coming here. I asked her if she knew the scientists would have to relocate. Yusin nodded, saying the research institute had received the notice early on. The time and evacuation points varied. The work at the institute couldn't be dropped immediately, and the safety level there was still higher than outside. The military was just taking preventative measures. Seeing her calm demeanor, I knew she had confirmed the situation with her own eyes. Otherwise, she would have been more anxious than anyone. She also mentioned that her grandfather and mother were busy organizing the experimental results and samples from the nuclear power plant trip. They would move out with the military later. If Zhonghai truly couldn't hold out. She paused, not continuing. Because that was the worst-case scenario, something no one wanted to think about, even though everyone understood it in their hearts. The military had tens of thousands of soldiers, and the scientists were heavily guarded. Their survival rate was the highest. I told Yusin that General Zhang had asked my team to escort the scientists to the Xingqing base. I didn't ask for everyone's opinion on this decision. Zhuiying, Zhonghai, and Sun Kuan would all follow my arrangements. Only Yusin was a newcomer, and she still had family staying in Zhonghai. I had just started saying, "If you want to stay," but before I could finish, she nodded and said, "Okay." She then took the initiative to say she would try her best to perform well, setting down her bag. Inside were only a few clothes. The rest were medicines and medical supplies. I looked at her for a moment and replied, "All right." Thinking about it, Yusin had always been like this. Once she agreed, she made decisions very quickly, making all my prepared persuasive words redundant. Not long after breakfast, a military jeep arrived at the residential area. A hoarse-voiced officer stepped out, announcing that we had to set off this morning. I was a bit surprised by the rapid pace. This time, we didn't depart from the transit zone, but headed straight to a city gate. It was heavily guarded, yet many civilians still lived there. Compared to other areas, this place was less affected by zombies. Some people were resting, while others took advantage of the sparse zombie presence to repair the city walls, setting up barricades. I even saw a few people in biohazard suits spraying something on the ground. The land around the Zhonghai Safe Island was incredibly precious, but with such a high population density, casualties were inevitable. A few military vehicles were already waiting at the gate. As the lead jeep approached, followed by military trucks and our minibus, many civilians stopped what they were doing and turned to look. They sensed something important was about to happen. But when the minibus appeared, the atmosphere instantly changed. It immediately drew everyone's gaze, especially the group of officers and soldiers waiting there. There were over a dozen people on the other vehicles. All of them looked toward the minibus, but their reasons were different from the civilians. I heard them whispering to each other that this was Team Shering. Don't underestimate this minibus. It could ram straight through a zombie horde. They were also discussing my mechanical modification abilities. This vehicle was the result of my superpower. Rumor had it that if it weren't for this incident, several major teams would have invited me to modify their vehicles. They even mentioned my marksmanship, saying that even Hawkeye couldn't compare. Someone cursed, saying that with such a strong superpower and incredible shooting skills, how were professionals like them supposed to make a living? In just one night, the reputation of me and Team Shering had reached these soldiers. Because last night, they learned that this mission would be a joint operation with us. While they were gossiping, I caught a glimpse of a pair of eyes peeking out from a window crack before quickly pulling back. The minibus and the military truck driven by Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan quickly approached the city gate. As I was observing the surroundings, an officer ran to the front of the vehicle. With a straight back, he gave a standard military salute and introduced himself as Zhou Chongqing, the escort captain. His mission was to coordinate with my team to complete the escort, and he would follow my command if necessary. I nodded in agreement. Zhou Chongqing immediately handed over a cloth bag, saying it was the reward for the team. I took it, and upon opening it, I was stunned. The entire bag was filled with mutant crystal cores. I was both thrilled and a bit regretful, because General Zhang had prepared a reward of 20 level 1 mutant crystal cores and 5 evolutionary crystals. I hadn't asked for these crystals, but he was truly generous this time. The military had already spent quite a bit to invite me for the Ranxiu mission, and this time the reward was even greater. It was both a rescue and an escort mission, and it also helped us leave Zhonghai. The only pity was that there were no level 2 mutant crystal cores. Though I understood it was very difficult, General Zhang had said he would try his best. Besides the crystal cores and crystals, the metals I requested had also been unloaded from another vehicle. Box by box, they were loaded onto the minibus. Zhou Chongqing said everything was fully prepared, nothing was missing. To arrange all this in just one night, if I had to do it myself, it wouldn't have been this fast. He then suggested that to ensure the scientists' safety, it would be best to separate them and have them stay on my team's minibus. I hadn't even finished saying that the vehicle was already quite crowded, mostly with women, making it a bit inconvenient, when 2 people stepped down from a military vehicle. Seeing them, the words caught in my throat. Initially, I thought the scientists assigned to the vehicle would be elderly. I didn't expect a young woman and a little girl, about 7 or 8 years old. The woman took the initiative to apologize, saying her daughter's health wasn't good. The conditions on the military vehicles were quite harsh, so she hoped they could hitch a ride on ours. If it was too crowded, just letting her daughter stay would be fine. The little girl had soft long hair, a round face, and wore a small pink backpack. She hid behind her mother, constantly stealing glances at me, her big, round, dark eyes like 2 grapes. Li Yusin whispered that she knew them. The woman was a botanist, and the little girl was quite famous in the research institute, a little genius. I looked at the girl a few more times. She looked both timid and obedient. It was hard to associate her with the word genius. But letting a young mother and her small child sit in a vehicle full of soldiers was indeed inconvenient. Perhaps they had heard what I just said. I immediately agreed to let the mother and daughter on board. The woman thanked me profusely. Meanwhile, Zhang Hai stuck his head out the window, teasing that this was the perk of having a luxury vehicle, making Sun Kuan shake his head at his sharp tongue. Though even he admitted that in this post-apocalyptic world, our minibus was indeed a rare luxury. After that, I met 2 other scientists. In total, we had to escort 3 people. 2 of them had family members with them. The other was quite young, but his family had been wiped out by zombies. He had no relatives left. The formation was quickly arranged. The city gates slowly opened, and the scene outside immediately hit our eyes. The civilians stood nervously to the sides. Between them and the hell outside was just a single wall. They didn't know what this convoy was going out to do. Only when they saw the vehicles roll out did a blank and empty look appear in their eyes. If it were them, no one would dare step outside. As soon as the city gate closed, those people breathed a sigh of relief. Inside the minibus, I summoned the Star Seeds control panel. The reward I just received hadn't even warmed my hands before I had to use it. The first thing was to upgrade the combat cabin. The system notified me that it required 2 level 1 mutant crystal cores to upgrade to a level 2 combat cabin. The area would expand, maintaining a 360-degree firing angle, allowing 2 people to use it simultaneously. Just going from 1 person to 2 required 2 crystal cores. I felt the pinch, but I also understood that the combat cabin didn't just expand in size. It also needed increased shock absorption and defensive armor. I confirmed the upgrade. Next was installing an oil-powered flamethrower for the base vehicle, a weapon that consumed a lot of fuel, using pure oxygen to burn at 2,000 degrees. It required another mutant crystal core. I nodded in agreement. With just a few operations, the crystal cores in my hand were nearly depleted. This base vehicle devoured crystal cores like candy, making my heart ache. The screen showed the progress of the combat cabin upgrade and the flamethrower construction, both at only 1%. The young woman and her daughter sat on the sofa. She wore glasses, holding a thick notebook and research materials. The little girl quietly stared at me with her big round eyes. At first, I didn't pay attention, but after being stared at for so long, I had to turn around. Just then, the little girl softly asked if all the pretty ladies on the vehicle were my wives. I froze, while Zhuing burst out laughing, confirming I hadn't misheard. I quickly denied it. The little girl nodded, letting out an "oh," her tone carrying a hint of disappointment that left me not knowing whether to laugh or cry. She continued asking where I was from. I replied, "Jiangbei." Immediately, she giggled, pulling her mother's hand to show off that she had guessed right, saying she knew I was from Jiangbei just by hearing my accent. This made the mother smile apologetically, saying Xiaonan was always like this. It turned out she had been staring at me all this time just because of a bet with her mother. She also mentioned that we would be passing through Jiangbei, which made me pause for a moment. Ever since the apocalypse broke out and I left Jiangbei, I haven't heard any news about the place. Zombies have swallowed almost the entire world. Aside from a few city bases that still have lights at night, most areas are plunged into darkness. The convoy kept moving forward. The zombies were increasing in number, so the minibus started speeding up. Dense gunfire rang out. The female scientist occasionally glanced outside, while the little girl sat obediently, showing no signs of fear. After satisfying her curiosity, she didn't initiate any more conversations with me. By dusk, the convoy entered a small city. Zhou Changqing reported over the radio that it was getting dark and traveling at night was too dangerous. The city ahead was only about a half-hour drive away, so we should stop and rest here. I agreed. Actually, Jiangbei was just up ahead. A part of me wanted to drop by, but nighttime was indeed too dangerous. Even with the minibus, I didn't want to face zombies and mutant beasts with excellent night vision in the dark. The female scientist came over and asked if we could pull over so she could collect some plant samples. As long as we didn't enter the city, it would be safe. Compared to going inside to scavenge for supplies, collecting samples by the roadside was indeed much less risky. I agreed. Escorting these scientists was quite pleasant. They weren't too rigid. Of course, if they made unreasonable demands, I would refuse immediately. I was here to escort them, not to seek my own death. As the convoy slowed down, a few gleaming eyes were quietly watching them from a high-rise building in the city. The green military vehicles stood out starkly on the desolate road. Am I seeing things? Those are military vehicles, right? On the rooftop, a group of people stood silently observing. Behind them was a massive SOS, painted in oil, a desperate signal for help. Earlier, they had heard a helicopter flying past. When they spotted it, they nearly went mad, running desperately to the roof, waving and screaming in despair. But the helicopter just slowly faded from their sight. Their loss of control and excitement had attracted a horde of zombies, nearly turning the whole group into a meal. Since then, someone took turns keeping watch on the roof every day, hoping to see any survivors, whether a rescue team or the military. They didn't need anything else, just to see living people, not the endless hordes of zombies out there. This group was truly miserable. Most were ordinary people. Only one was a mutant, but her ability wasn't strong, only slightly useful for escaping. Still, if it weren't for that ability, they probably wouldn't have survived this long. They were like rats living in the sewers, struggling at the very bottom of society after missing their chance to be rescued. They had fallen into despair for a long time. But now, a ray of hope appeared before their eyes. The military had arrived. As the news spread, over a dozen survivors quickly gathered on the roof. However, their excitement gradually died down when they realized the military convoy was only stopping outside the city. They had no intention of entering at all. What were they doing? Why weren't they coming into the city? The female mutant, Yin Fangfei, also climbed up to the roof. At first, she was thrilled, but after observing for a while, that excitement slowly faded. Yin Fangfei wasn't old, just in her early 20s. But in this group, she held the most power. She was also the only one who managed to stay relatively clean. The others had disheveled hair and ragged clothes, while she still tried to keep her face somewhat presentable. It revealed her pretty features. Even so, her hair was greasy, and despite changing clothes, her body still carried an unmistakable, unpleasant odor. In the apocalypse, she didn't dare use perfume for fear of attracting zombies. It's probably getting dark. They'll come in tomorrow morning, an older woman said, deliberately trying to curry favor with her. Perhaps standing too close, Yin Fangfei frowned slightly, cursing her for being filthy in her mind. She knew very well that the woman was sucking up to her. Tomorrow morning? Yin Fangfei hesitated. She was a mutant. Although not a combat type, she believed her ability was very special. As long as she joined the military, she would definitely be valued. She wouldn't have to endure this miserable life anymore. She really didn't want to drag out this current existence for even another minute. What is that? Someone suddenly spoke up. Only then did they notice a minibus breaking away from the military convoy. It wasn't that they hadn't seen it earlier, but all their attention had been on the military vehicles. Looking closely now, for that minibus to leave the military formation was truly too risky. The vehicle drove toward them, but only went a short distance before pulling over by the roadside. Then, I saw a few people step out. At first, Yin Fangfei was just stunned because they weren't wearing military uniforms. But immediately after, her eyes widened when she realized they were all women. These women were dressed neatly and cleanly, their hair smooth, without a single speck of dirt on them. The distance wasn't close, but Yin Fangfei could see clearly. One girl even stretched comfortably right after stepping off the bus. Seeing that, Yin Fangfei turned to stone. Was this the life of women protected by the military? They didn't have to suffer at all. They certainly didn't have to live in a stinking environment like her, nor did they have to live in a daily nightmare or protect this bunch of useless people. Even though she tried to keep herself clean, compared to them, she looked like she had just crawled out of a dumpster. Are they survivors too? They don't look like soldiers. Someone whispered. Yin Fangfei turned her head and saw the survivors, especially the men, looking at those girls with amazed eyes, as if they were the only real women. A wave of discomfort and frustration surged in Yin Fangfei's heart. They're just parasites, trading their bodies for benefits. They won't even know when they get tossed aside, she said coldly. She had been suppressing herself for too long in this suffocating life. The appearance of those women was like lighting the fuse to her emotional explosion. She was a special mutant. She deserved to live better than them. Make some banners. We can't just stand here. We have to get their attention, Yin Fangfei spoke up. She didn't want to miss her only chance. If these people weren't so afraid of death, she would have forced them to find a way out to seek help long ago. By the roadside, I saw Professor Qin Yu being protected by Jiang Zhuing and Ying. She was gathering some plants at the edge of the field. This area had few zombies and no mutant beasts, but Qin Yu still only operated on the outskirts. The other 3 scientists, who didn't specialize in botany, stayed behind to help the military set up camp. My mom said that after the apocalypse started, for some reason, plants also began to mutate. Maybe it's due to environmental changes, Qin Xiaonan said, swinging her legs as she sat by the minibus door. So are those changes good or bad? I asked. Qin Xiaonan rested her chin on her hand, thought for a moment, and said, before the apocalypse, it would be bad. But after the apocalypse, human physique and immunity have both improved. Maybe they're still edible. As long as humans are alive, we'll still have to grow crops in the future. Otherwise, we'll eat everything up sooner or later. I heard Star City has farming conditions, which is why my mom is going there. Are you going to study botany later too? Li Yusin asked. No, I want to study combat, Qin Xiaonan replied, her voice so serious that it made people take notice. Right at that moment, Rin Xiu suddenly turned her head toward the camp. She said zombies were heading that way, and we should head back. I immediately called Professor Qin to get ready to leave. On the high-rise building, someone whispered, they're leaving. Another asked, what about the banners? Then reassured themselves, we'll figure it out tomorrow. No one dared to shout, nor did anyone dare to cross through the zombie horde. Yin Fangfei clenched her fists, watching the minibus gradually disappear from sight. She didn't want to keep living like this. She had to become more radiant than those women. During the day, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but when night fell, 5 women and a little girl all stared at me, making me feel quite awkward. Originally, adding just Li Yusin meant the bed and sofa were already not enough. Now, with Professor Qin and her daughter, the space instantly became much more cramped. Sensing the somewhat awkward atmosphere, I scratched my chin and sighed inwardly. The interior space of the vehicle had just been upgraded, yet it already felt like there wasn't enough room. Let's just squeeze in a bit, I said helplessly. Professor Qin and her daughter were given one bed. Jiang Zhuiying and Ying each took a bed. Li Yusin and Rin Xiu yielded to each other for a while. Ultimately, Li Yusin took the sofa, and Rin Xiu laid a mat down next to me. The space inside the vehicle wasn't very large, but it was well ventilated. Even with so many people, it didn't feel stuffy. Hearing the soft rustling as everyone settled in, Li Yusin lay on the sofa and closed her eyes. So this was how everyone usually slept. She still had a bit of trouble falling asleep, but she seemed used to yielding to Rin Xiu. In the apocalypse, having conditions like this was already incredibly good. Compared to nights spent in tents, sleeping in the vehicle was almost a kind of bliss for her. She stared out the window for a long time. Seeing the sentries lying prone on the ground, motionless with guns in hand, there were moments she thought they had fallen asleep. But when it was time to change shifts, the soldier immediately stood up, his movements crisp and decisive. My vehicle was parked at the far end of the camp, separated from the soldiers by a short distance. In reality, I was utilizing the vehicle's defensive capabilities as a guard post, placing it at the border with the city. Before she knew it, Li Yusin had drifted off to sleep. This was also her first night with the Shuriying squad. Meanwhile, on the high-rise building across the way, Yin Fangfei hadn't slept a wink. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the military camp, her heart tense to the extreme. This opportunity was too important. She absolutely wouldn't allow herself to miss it. Why hasn't the military come yet? The more she thought about it, the more she felt that just waiting like this was too risky. Would they enter the city tomorrow? And even if they did, they might not notice her group. Thinking about it calmly, when the military entered the city, surrounded by high-rises, their attention would definitely be focused on the streets below. It would be even harder to spot a group hiding up high. The more Yin Fangfei thought about it, the more uneasy she became, feeling that this was highly likely. But crossing through the zombie horde at night was far too dangerous. I think we should find a way to break through the encirclement. She woke up the dozen or so survivors in the group, both men and women. In the dead of night, no one could really sleep anyway. With the hope of survival right in front of them, how could they rest easy? Speaking of breaking through, everyone hesitated. Yin Fangfei insisted she had calculated it carefully. The distance from here to the military was actually less than 1,000 meters. Someone anxiously brought up the zombies, but she immediately cut them off, saying the number of zombies wasn't as high as they thought. The main roads were crowded, but the alleys would have fewer. Moreover, she had a plan. Saying that, she pulled out a cell phone she had scavenged in the building. Luckily, it still had battery and worked. She suggested setting the alarm to ring every 5 minutes and sneaking the phone in the opposite direction of their path. That way, the zombies would be drawn there and continuously dispersed, making it easier for them to break through. The survivors looked at each other. Everyone was in rags, hadn't had a full meal in days, with sunken eyes, gaunt faces, and cracked lips. They looked even more pathetic than the zombies. Under these circumstances, who would dare go place a phone in the middle of a zombie horde? Someone objected, saying the phone would be destroyed the moment it rang. Another worried that the zombies in their path would be drawn over, making it even more dangerous. Seeing everyone cowering, Yin Fangfei was furious to the extreme. If she didn't need these people as meat shields, she wouldn't have bothered talking so much. Finally, she scrapped the phone plan, a cold glint flashing in her eyes. These people were useless, but they weren't stupid. The thought of being stuck with them made her even more irritated. Then we break through directly. I'll use my ability to protect everyone, Yin Fangfei said. She emphasized that if they stayed here, they definitely wouldn't survive. This area used to be a commercial center. There wasn't much food, and their supplies were almost gone. To survive, this was their only chance. As long as she was here, they would have hope. With no other choice, they could only risk it. Even without combat abilities, to survive, this group was forced to voluntarily protect her. Therefore, even if breaking through was extremely dangerous, they would become her meat shields. It was less than 1,000 meters. She absolutely had to survive and make it across. Yin Fangfei's bloodshot eyes glared at the group in front of her. When she saw them hesitate for a moment before finally nodding in agreement, her heart pounded wildly with excitement. The others carried fear mixed with hope, feeling her words made sense. Suppressing her agitation, Yin Fangfei urged everyone to quickly get ready to move out. Under her pushing, the survivors gathered at the back door of the building, quietly removing the barricades. Behind the iron door was a world crawling with zombies. Yin Fangfei was both nervous and terrified, but she kept reassuring herself inwardly. As long as she reached the military, she wouldn't have to endure this anymore. Her hair hadn't been washed in ages. It was itchy and uncomfortable, and she was even afraid there might be lice. Before the apocalypse, she had never suffered like this. As a special mutant, she had already begun dreaming of a glamorous life ahead. That was the life she deserved. At the same time, just as Li Yusin fell asleep, her eyes suddenly snapped open. Almost simultaneously, I sat up from the floor mat next to her. Despite waking up suddenly, there was no trace of sleepiness in my eyes. Only a calm gaze reflecting the dim moonlight. Almost immediately after, Ying sat up, followed by Jiang Zhuiying and Rin Xiu waking up one by one. I stood up, threw on my jacket, and whispered that there was movement. From afar, an ear-piercing scream tore through the night. Rin Xiu immediately expanded her mental perception, quickly scanning the surroundings. Her voice carried a hint of surprise as she reported that there were survivors heading this way. It wasn't strange for there to be survivors in the city, but at this hour, something was clearly wrong. I immediately said, with noises like that, they'll attract the zombies. We have to go check it out. Rin Xiu nodded, instantly using her mental link to inform Zhou Chongqing, telling him and his squad to stay behind and protect the scientists. Last night, when the military set up camp, the scientists all slept in tents. Now, everyone had been woken up by the noise outside. Professor Qin also woke up, holding Xiaonan tightly in her arms, her face full of worry as she asked what was happening. Li Yusin softly reassured her, saying it was fine, our captain would handle it. Ying had already taken the driver's seat at some point, stepping on the gas with practiced ease. The engine roared, and the transit vehicle quickly turned around, charging straight toward the city. There were quite a few abandoned cars on the road, and the entire city in the distance was swallowed by thick darkness. In that atmosphere, the only thing that reached our ears were the tragic screams echoing from afar. A scream would ring out, and then quickly die away. The fate of that survivor was almost a given. Professor Qin turned pale and hurriedly covered Xiaonan's ears. This was her first time leaving the Zhonghai safe zone, and as a botanist, she had never faced zombies or mutant beasts head-on before. On the way, when she saw zombies, she managed to stay calm. But now, hearing the desperate cries for help from a survivor, her expression clearly couldn't hold up anymore. Xiaonan, who had looked quite brave earlier, also showed signs of anxiety. Very quickly, we spotted the zombie horde ahead. In the dark, they ran swiftly, their eyes emitting a murky glow, looking like a pack of starving wolves. But the danger level was far beyond that. An ordinary person facing this scene would only panic and lose their bearings. Ahead of the zombie horde were two figures running for their lives, but the distance between them and the zombies was rapidly shrinking. Suddenly, one person fell, screaming in despair for help the moment they hit the ground. But the person running with them didn't even turn their head, just kept sprinting like a maniac. Right at that moment, our vehicle charged in. The person running in front was Yin Fangfei. When she saw the transit vehicle approaching, it was like she had grabbed a lifeline, screaming for help in a mix of despair and joy. She had finally escaped. And in that moment, she thought to herself that she had overestimated the abilities of those survivors. She had almost died with them. Seeing the vehicle rushing over, she reached out her hand, thinking it would stop, the door would open, and she could jump on immediately, completely cutting ties with the terrible days she just went through. However, the vehicle ignored her, speeding straight past without slowing down at all. The vehicle plowed directly into the zombie horde, leaving Yin Fangfei stunned. A thought popped into her head. Do they want to die? She stood dazed for a split second before continuing to run desperately forward, because she knew the military was in that direction. Even though her body was nearly exhausted, she didn't dare stop, her heart full of hope. A thunderous crash echoed from behind. She heard the sound of the vehicle still moving, and the noise was getting closer. Finally, Yin Fangfei turned her head and instantly froze. The vehicle was completely unscathed and was even turning back around. Looking behind the vehicle, not a single zombie was left standing on the road. She couldn't believe it. Such a cheap-looking vehicle had actually crushed the entire zombie horde to death. Her companion, the moment they fell, was already doomed to die. Stop! Stop! Seeing the vehicle approaching, Yin Fangfei frantically waved her hands. The vehicle screeched and stopped right in front of her. The headlights weren't on, and the front of the car was still covered in fresh blood, making her shudder. But when the vehicle came to a complete halt, she truly felt she had escaped death. She stepped up to the door just as it opened. Panting, she asked if there was water, saying she really couldn't run anymore. But the moment she got a clear look inside the vehicle, she was stunned. This was a mobile home. There was a sofa, beds, and even a table. On the table were colas and a few bottles of soda. Her throat was parched. It had been far too long since she had clean water. She couldn't wait any longer and was about to step onto the vehicle, but suddenly realized someone was standing right at the door, blocking her. Looking up, she opened her mouth but instantly widened her eyes as if she had seen a ghost. The person standing in front of her was me. I stood at the door looking at her, with Ying and the others beside me. I had just said, "Hold on," when Yin Fangfei screamed like a maniac, calling out my name directly. Jiang Zhuing immediately snapped at her to keep her voice down, but Yin Fangfei paid no attention. Her eyes were glued to Li Yusin standing next to me. She asked if she was Li Yusin. Li Yusin looked closely at Yin Fangfei for a moment before finally recognizing her. It really was her. Actually, she didn't recognize her at first because Yin Fangfei was so filthy it was hard to tell. I was also a bit surprised. Yin Fangfei was someone I remembered. Back in school, she had quite a status. She came from a wealthy family, wore all designer brands. It was just that I was never close to her. Yin Fangfei saw the stunned look on Li Yusin's face, and the resentment in her heart grew even stronger. Compared to Li Yusin's clean appearance, she looked exactly like someone who had just crawled out of a sewer, reeking of a foul stench. Meeting a former classmate in such a state brought her no joy at all. Li Yusin was a bit surprised, mixed with joy, saying she didn't expect to run into her here. Then she asked if she still remembered me. Meeting an acquaintance who was still alive, Li Yusin genuinely felt happy. Yin Fangfei thought for a moment. Then she said coldly that she didn't remember much. Yin Fangfei was almost going crazy. She craved a bottle of soda so badly her throat was burning. How did you get here? The young man continued to ask. Hearing that question, a flash of panic crossed Yin Fangfei's eyes. She had actually prepared an answer, but being asked so directly still made her heart skip a beat. I don't know either. I just ran the whole way, Yin Fangfei replied. How many people were with you? I pressed on. 17 in total. Where are the others? I don't know. We got separated halfway. Yin Fangfei shook her head, her palms drenched in sweat. How could she not know? It wasn't that they got lost. She had deliberately pointed a group of people in the wrong direction. From the very beginning, she never thought everyone could survive. Those people refused to risk their lives using the phone's sound to attract the zombies. Yin Fangfei agreed verbally, but inwardly she thought they were idiots. Without sacrifices, how could they get past the zombie horde? Perhaps everyone thought the one to die wouldn't be them, that as long as they exploited the sacrifices of others, they could survive. Therefore, in Yin Fangfei's mind, she hadn't done anything wrong. She was just stronger than them, had an ability, and so she was the one who had the last laugh. Actually, whether the people she misdirected lived or died, Yin Fangfei wasn't sure. They might still be alive, but trapped among the zombies, they would die sooner or later. Despite constantly telling herself she did nothing wrong, this was still her first time doing something like this. Moreover, the young man standing in front of her had eyes so cold, it was as if he could see right through every thought in her head. The woman standing behind him, with deep gray eyes, was also staring at her, as if she had already seen through her true nature. This made Yin Fangfei both anxious and irritated. Who are you to ask me so many questions? I was terrified too. How could I remember clearly? Yin Fangfei started to snap, but halfway through, she suddenly stopped. She felt this man looked somewhat familiar. I noticed her confusion and smiled as I stated my name. Back in school, my presence in class was very faint. With Yin Fangfei's arrogant personality, it was normal for her not to notice me. After all, we studied together for 3 years. After taking a few more close looks, she finally felt a sense of familiarity. Yin Fangfei revealed a look of surprise. No wonder Li Yusin asked earlier if she still remembered me. It turned out I was also on this vehicle. But why? Why were we together? She clearly knew I and Li Yusin were living on the same vehicle. She had been watching all along. In the past, Li Yusin was the school goddess, secretly loved by countless boys, with social connections so good it made Yin Fangfei jealous. And what about me? Just a poor guy who had to take care of his younger sister. Yet now, the goddess was with me for survival, even living with several other women. Yin Fangfei's gaze toward Li Yusin became full of hidden meaning, her heart filled with disdain. She just didn't expect me to be living quite well. Maybe I was a mutant? But with such weak energy, even if I was a mutant, it wouldn't amount to much. Completely incomparable to her. Thinking of this, Yin Fangfei smiled, saying what a coincidence it was to have 2 of her classmates on the vehicle. That was even better. She told me to take her to the military. Her mind was full of fantasies. If Li Yusin could live so well just by clinging to me, even getting to drink cola, wouldn't she quickly return to her former life once she joined the military? I raised my hand to stop her, saying hold on. You still haven't answered my question. Yin Fangfei froze, forcing a smile, and asked if I wasn't going to let her on the vehicle. I said very bluntly, if she refused to answer, I wouldn't let her on. Yin Fangfei stiffened completely. She had lowered her voice, tried to suck up to me like this, and I still wouldn't let it go? Meanwhile, I maintained a cold expression, because just now, Rin Xiu had told me through our mental link that Yin Fangfei was lying. I didn't have a deep impression of Yin Fangfei, but in those few short seconds, I recalled a few old memories. Back in school, she often joined others in bullying female students, but maintained a very good reputation in front of the boys. She was very good at currying favor. All of that was before the apocalypse. But now, regardless of her personality, if she was just an ordinary survivor, I would still take her to the military to be handled, maybe assigned to logistics, and sent to the Star City base. However, in the dead of night, a whole group of people crossed through the zombie horde, and in the end, only she made it out alive. And we saw with our own eyes that she abandoned her companion. Furthermore, she was lying. I couldn't just ignore that. Yin Fangfei tried to suppress her anger, saying the situation was very complicated, and she would explain once she met the military. She said it wasn't easy for her to survive, yet I wouldn't let it go, interrogating her like a criminal. I didn't reply. Finally, she lost her temper, turning to blame Lee Yusin for just standing there watching, then loudly declaring she wanted to see the military commander. Lee Yusin looked at her without saying a word, because she trusted I wouldn't make things difficult for Yin Fangfei without reason. Plus, her escape process was indeed very suspicious. Yin Fangfei retorted stubbornly, saying she wanted to see what the commander had to say. I said calmly, I am the commander. She looked like she couldn't believe it, because she knew my background well. I had never joined the military. How could I be a commander? Even if I was a mutant, I couldn't be sitting in this vehicle acting as a commander. She thought I was bluffing. I didn't care if she believed it or not. I just said she refused to answer. But her thoughts had betrayed her. I wouldn't let someone like that on my vehicle. For the sake of our past as classmates, I'd let her fend for herself. Since she could survive and escape on her own, continuing to survive alone shouldn't be too hard. I ordered the vehicle to start and turn back. At first, Yin Fangfei didn't believe it, but when she saw we were really about to leave, she panicked. She screamed that she was a mutant, that her ability was very special and useful, asking if I didn't need mutants. In her mind, she thought, if even Lee Yusin could be on the vehicle, she had even more reason to be. Not to mention there were ordinary people and a child on board. She was clearly more useful than them. If I needed her to tag along, she could accept that. Right at that moment, the vehicle door slammed shut in her face. In the moment the door closed, she saw me standing behind it, coldly saying, no need. The girl holding the knife next to me added that she should be grateful she kept her life for the sake of being old classmates, and to cherish it. Those words made Yin Fangfei tremble, instinctively taking a step back. If it weren't for the fact that we were classmates, would I have killed her? The minibus quickly drove away, leaving her standing all alone in the darkness. Yin Fangfei stood frozen in place, completely unable to believe it. She had risked her life, gambled everything, and even forced herself to be ruthless just to escape. And the result was, they didn't need her. Not only did they not need her, but they outright rejected her, refusing to let her on the vehicle. She stood there dazed for a long time, the cold night wind blowing past, making her whole body shiver. From her teeth to her legs, Yin Fangfei was trembling uncontrollably. A feeling of extreme resentment surged in her heart. So cruel. Jiang Lucier and Lee Yusin, these two are truly too cruel. They actually dared to leave me to die. I even said she could survive on her own, but how could she survive alone? It was no different from sending her to her death. The hatred in Yin Fangfei's heart boiled over, countless crazy thoughts flashing through her mind. She cursed, wishing we would be torn apart by zombies, wishing we would scream in despair. Why don't you just die? But in the end, she didn't move. Her stamina was depleted, her spirit swallowed by hatred and despair. In this apocalypse, she knew well she couldn't go up against me, someone with a team and weapons in hand. On the vehicle, Lee Yusin sighed softly, saying she didn't expect to meet a classmate in this situation. She turned to look in the direction where we left Yin Fangfei, still feeling a bit of pity, but didn't say anything more. Jiang Zhuiying thought this wasn't strange at all. This place was very close to Jiangbei anyway. Whether Yin Fangfei was already here or ran over, it wasn't weird. Rin Xiu, however, spoke bluntly. She had a very bad feeling about Yin Fangfei, sensing that her thoughts were filled with ambition and lust, the type of person who would use any means necessary to achieve her goals. With her telepathic ability, Rin Xiu could somewhat sense the other party's thoughts. And in her eyes, Yin Fangfei was absolutely not a good person. I made it very clear. Even though we couldn't confirm what she had done, we saw with our own eyes that she abandoned her companion. I didn't want to save that kind of person. I was never foolishly kind-hearted, nor would I be swayed by Yin Fangfei's ability. Even if her ability was truly special, keeping someone like that around was no different from raising a venomous snake. Sooner or later, it would bite back. I ordered us to return to base. Tonight, the whole squad would be on high alert, and we would leave first thing tomorrow morning. Early the next morning, as soon as it was light, the convoy set off again. When passing by the area from last night, only bloodstains and a few shattered bones remained on the ground. There was no sign of zombies, nor was Yin Fangfei anywhere to be seen. The convoy didn't stop, quickly moving on, and I completely didn't care about her whereabouts. At this moment, Yin Fangfei was standing in a two-story rural house in the distance, watching the convoy pass by on the road ahead. She wasn't standing alone. In the living room behind her were 2 men and 1 woman. These 3 were the ones she met last night. Thinking back carefully, Yin Fangfei gradually realized it might not have been a chance encounter. They had deliberately sought her out. They had asked her a lot about me and that minibus. When they found out she knew me and Li Yusin, they offered to let her tag along. At the time, Yin Fangfei was so desperate she agreed immediately without thinking. But after a few hours, once she calmed down, she started to get suspicious. She felt these 3 were clearly targeting me and my squad. There were only 3 of them, while I had a team of over a dozen. This was highly unusual. The woman holding the knife reported in a low voice that I had set off. The knife in her hand spun nimbly between her fingers, but her eyes weren't focused on it at all. The man called Captain was about 35, with a calm face and an extremely tall build. Sitting on the sofa, he made it look small. His height was definitely over 1.9 meters, which was very rare in Huaxia. He replied softly, telling her not to call him Captain anymore. If he didn't complete the mission assigned by Commissioner Chu this time, there was no need to return alive. But if he did, his status would be different. Saying that, he looked up, a cold, murderous intent flashing in his eyes. I had left the Zhonghai safe zone, but how could Chu Zhongshan easily let go of his son's murder? Chun Biao was the one he sent. He was Chu Zhongshan's trusted bodyguard. Chun Biao had received countless favors. Without Chu Zhongshan, he wouldn't have his status or even be alive today. Chu Zhongshan treated him like half a son. When he learned that the only son was killed by me, Chun Biao wanted to kill me immediately, but was stopped. Once I left the safe zone, Chu Zhongshan finally made up his mind. The aura irradiating from Chun Biao made the other 2 in the room feel a chill down their spines. Before the apocalypse, he was a mercenary in Africa and South America with terrifying combat skills. After the apocalypse, he even awakened an ability. The other 2 were also experts under Chu Zhongshan, but in front of Chun Biao, they could only act as assistants. Last night, when they heard the commotion, they discovered Yin Fangfei. A woman like her wasn't worth their attention, but because she gritted her teeth and cursed me, knew my name, and even knew me personally, that was the only reason she was still alive now. Chun Biao suddenly turned to look at Yin Fangfei standing by the window, saying she didn't need to pretend she didn't hear anything. Every expression and subtle movement of hers couldn't escape his eyes. Yin Fangfei startled and turned around, both guarded and terrified. Chun Biao's gaze put her under immense pressure. Even though she tried to act like she heard nothing, she was seen through. Chun Biao stared at her dirty face and asked slowly, "You said you're a mutant. So what is your ability?" Being stared at by Chun Biao gave Yin Fangfei goosebumps all over. It felt like facing a real zombie. In her heart, Chun Biao was much more terrifying than me. Toward me, she only felt hatred and resentment. In her mind, I was just someone who got lucky and crawled up from the bottom of society, grabbed a bit of power, and started throwing my weight around. Before the apocalypse, she wouldn't even spare a glance at someone like me. No matter how well I studied or how hard I tried, I would ultimately just be working for her class. Even after the apocalypse happened, Yin Fangfei still thought she was a cut above me. She had a special ability. It was just bad luck that she got trapped as soon as she ran to this small town. Otherwise, how would it be Mai and Li Yusin's turn to stand in front of her, showing off? Inwardly, she had clearly heard the conversation between Chun Biao and the others, and understood why they brought her back. They wanted to kill me. Chun Biao knew she heard, but still didn't lower his voice, clearly letting her hear on purpose. His question now was just to see if she still had any use. If not, a thought flashed through Yin Fangfei's mind that I was too arrogant. Treating me like that, making enemies, is just bringing it upon himself. She took a deep breath, kept her composure, and said her ability was extremely acute hearing. Within 100 meters, even the slightest sound couldn't escape her ears. It was thanks to this ability that she survived until now, hearing the footsteps of zombies from afar to avoid them. The other survivors all had to rely on her hearing. That was also why they believed her and were used by her as bait to distract the zombies. If the last person hadn't run too slowly and dragged the zombies along, she wouldn't have almost died. When that person fell, it was lucky she didn't stomp on them one more time. How could she possibly turn back to save them? After saying that, Yin Fangfei seemed to regain some confidence, standing up straight to look at Chen Biao. Chen Biao just smirked, slowly talking about the hearing limits of humans and animals. He asked what level her hearing had reached. Yin Fangfei froze, shaking her head, saying she didn't have the means to test it. She only knew that within 100 meters, even the sound of a bird's wings flapping could be perceived by her. Chen Biao nodded. He said that was indeed quite a special ability. He had investigated me thoroughly and knew I was a strong opponent. But in his eyes, every human had a weakness. As long as it was found, they could be killed in one strike. And Yin Fangfei could play a significant role in this. Not to mention she also knew me and Li Yusin. The woman next to him smiled, telling Yin Fangfei to listen very carefully to what her old friend had to say. She just forced a smile, not mentioning that she and I were actually not close at all. Chen Biao signaled, and the other man immediately took a piece of meat from his backpack, unwrapped it, and tossed it to her. He told her to eat up, as she probably hadn't had a full meal before. Her ability still had a lot of potential to develop. It had been far too long since Yin Fangfei had a full meal. Her eyes were glued to the meat, so thirsty and hungry she was dizzy. The meat fell to the ground, and she swallowed hard. Without blinking, she lunged forward, picked it up, wiped it off, and bit into it ravenously. Dried mutant beast meat was still very fragrant, just tough and dry. As she ate, she thought of the sodas on my vehicle, thinking that if I died, all of that would be hers. After last night, Yin Fangfei felt she had awakened. In this world, it wasn't just zombies eating people. Humans ate each other too. If you weren't ruthless enough, you couldn't live well. There were no laws, no morals. Whatever you wanted, you just took it directly. The woman looked at Yin Fangfei with a half-smile. In her eyes, Yin Fangfei was no different from a madwoman. Chen Biao stood up and ordered them to move out, following closely behind us. This small town wasn't far from Jiangbei. Before the apocalypse, it only took half an hour by car. But after the apocalypse, the distance was stretched many times over. When we stopped to rest, Zhou Changqing spread out the map, saying we wouldn't enter downtown Jiangbei, but just pass through this area because it was the shortest route. Before that, we had to detour around the mountainous area because there was a massive explosion at an acetylene plant in Jiangbei when the apocalypse broke out, making the road impassable. I looked at the map. I was very familiar with Jiangbei. That factory was the acetylene plant. The acetylene explosion had immense destructive power, so it was understandable that vehicles couldn't pass. When the apocalypse happened, besides zombies, there were countless disasters caused by chain reactions like accidents and fires. All of these were obstacles that even the government couldn't foresee. My eyes stopped at the mountainous areas circled in red. Jiangbei had many mountains. Seeing the mountains, I immediately remembered the mutant beast I encountered when I left this place. Looking at that red mark, a bad premonition welled up in my heart. I let out a soft breath, saying it was better to be careful. Knowing the convoy wouldn't enter the center of Jiangbei, both Jiang Zhuiying and Li Yusin, who were born and raised there, couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. Since the apocalypse broke out, many friends and classmates had gone missing. They didn't know how many of them were still alive. In this world, running into an acquaintance who was still alive was always a pleasant surprise. Thinking of that, Li Yusin felt even more regretful. If Yin Fangfei didn't harbor such twisted thoughts, meeting an old classmate would have been a very joyous occasion. Captain Zhang, we're about to enter the mountainous area, Zhou Changqing reported over the radio. At the same time, Ren Xiu also expanded her mental domain. Maintaining continuous mental perception was a huge burden for her. Therefore, she only used her ability in special situations. This was the same as other abilities. Humans couldn't maintain a state of high concentration or operate at their limits continuously. After expanding her mental domain, Ren Xiu quickly scanned the surroundings, but found nothing unusual. Let's head into the mountains. Watch out for mutant beasts, I spoke up. The convoy began to enter the mountain road. Dense forests lined both sides, giving the scenery an indescribably gloomy feel. All the soldiers heightened their vigilance. Even Qin Xiaon and became quieter than usual. Professor Qin observed the vegetation outside the window and said that after the apocalypse, Many plant species had undergone obvious changes. The virus didn't infect plants directly, but the mutations in animals and humans had indirectly affected them. If pre-apocalyptic humans ate these plants, mutations might also occur. Jiang Zhuing curiously asked if eating them now was safe or even beneficial. Professor Qin thought for a moment, then nodded, thinking it was a possibility. She used artemisinin extracted from sweet wormwood as an example. After the apocalypse, this plant might have mutated, changing the effects of artemisinin, making it different from before. Hearing this, Li Yusin said that if they could find a plant with effects similar to mutant beast meat, the supply shortage problem would be solved. However, Professor Qin wasn't very optimistic, because currently, whether it was evolutionary crystals or anything else, they essentially came from mutant beast meat. This was still the only source that could rapidly enhance strength and promote evolution for mutants. Li Yusin shook her head slightly. She knew she was just dreaming. I listened to the conversation and was also interested in Professor Qin's analysis. Right at that moment, the vehicle in front suddenly stopped. Zhou Changqing reported that there was a landslide ahead, probably due to the previous rain. Fortunately, it wasn't large-scale. He planned to send 2 vehicles and some soldiers to clear it, while suggesting that I and the scientists stay behind to ensure safety. A landslide was no small matter. Soldiers clearing dirt and rocks would be in danger, and there was no telling how long it would take. I was just about to say I'd go check the situation when Qin Xiaonan quickly spoke up, saying she and her mom wouldn't get off the bus and would just stay with me. Along the way, the little girl had realized that the Shuriying squad's vehicle was the safest and most comfortable place. I nodded, then told Ing to drive forward. The military vehicle carrying the 2 scientists ahead had stopped. Seeing my vehicle still moving forward without any intention of stopping, everyone was surprised. A scientist surnamed Peng rolled down his window, saying they couldn't help with the clearing anyway. Beside him, a soldier reminded him that they brought entrenching shovels. I frowned, because the escort squad had enough troop types to handle most situations on the road, but a landslide clearly wasn't one of them. Using entrenching shovels to dig out dirt and rocks was highly inefficient. We might have to sleep here tonight. I said I'd go see if I could help. Seeing the minibus continue forward, Professor Peng could only sigh, thinking I was young, had never seen a severe landslide, and was being somewhat stubborn. Moreover, Professor Qin and her daughter were on the vehicle. The landslide area held many hidden dangers. The 2 scientists could only shake their heads, while the soldiers on the military vehicle anxiously followed from a distance, guarding against any sudden appearance of mutant beasts. Soon, the vehicle approached the landslide area. A patch of yellowish-brown earth was exposed amidst the lush green hillside. A massive amount of dirt and rocks completely blocked the narrow mountain road, making it impossible for vehicles to pass. Some soldiers stood guard with guns, while others used entrenching shovels to try and clear the large rocks. Even Zhou Changqing joined in personally. His body swelled to twice the size of a normal person. With bulging muscles, he single-handedly lifted a massive boulder, making the surrounding soldiers cheer. That strength was truly terrifying. He truly lived up to his title as the captain of the escort squad. However, there were too many rocks here. Some were nearly half a meter in diameter. Clearing them manually was incredibly exhausting. Zhou Changqing asked in surprise why I came up here. He had reminded me to stay back because of the risk of a secondary landslide. Right at that moment, the roof of the minibus popped open, revealing the combat turret, and Jiang Zhuing poked her head out. Waving her hand, she said, "My brother says everyone should step back." Hearing that, Zhou Changqing froze, and the surrounding soldiers looked at each other in bewilderment. This was a place they couldn't stay for long, which was why even Zhou Changqing had to personally lead the effort, racing against time to clear the debris. My order left many soldiers confused. They weren't my subordinates, and they had only heard tales of my battle records. So when they heard this seemingly unreasonable order, a few showed clear dissatisfaction. Professor Peng, upon hearing this, grew even more anxious. Wasn't this just causing trouble? At that moment, Zhou Changqing, sweating profusely, had to put down the large boulder he was trying to lift. He wiped his sweat, released his ability, and said simply, "Listen to Captain Zhang." Since he said so, the soldiers had to step back. They stood watching the minibus with deep suspicion. Did they plan to use the minibus to ram the pile of dirt and rocks? Nonsense. Professor Peng pushed up his glasses and added, the minibus might be sturdy, but it can't possibly push this pile away. I'm no geologist, but the soil here is very loose. A strong impact will definitely cause a secondary landslide. If that happens, clearing it will be even harder. If we can't get through here, we'll be forced to risk taking a more complicated route with more zombies, and casualties will be unavoidable. He thought I hadn't considered those consequences. The more he thought about it, the more reckless it seemed, so he ignored the warnings and walked quickly toward me. I had stopped the minibus in front of the landslide when he ran over, shouting, Captain Zhang, you can't do this. An impact will cause a secondary landslide. I replied bluntly, I don't plan on ramming it. He froze, looking the minibus up and down. If you're not ramming it, what other way is there? Then let the soldiers keep clearing it. It's getting dark. I said I have a way. Clearing it by hand definitely won't be faster. What way? Even if you're the captain, you should explain it clearly so everyone can weigh in. I just replied, wait a moment and you'll see. He was furious. The soldiers who heard this exchanged displeased looks. At first, they thought I was going to ram the pile with the minibus. Now I wasn't ramming it, nor was I doing anything else, and I wasn't letting them continue clearing. So what exactly was I planning to do? In their eyes, the pile of dirt and rocks was like a small hill. If we just waited, would it magically fly away? I didn't bother explaining. With the scurrying squad, they never doubted my decisions. Professor Peng waited a bit longer, couldn't take it anymore, and turned to Zhou Chongqing. Captain Zhou, just keep clearing it. It won't interfere. If he has a way, he can do it whenever. Zhou Chongqing trusted me a lot. The mission he received from old General Zheng was to assist me. But those words made sense. He nodded, Professor Peng is right. Let's keep clearing. Saying that, he rolled up his sleeves, approached a boulder the size of a car tire, let out a loud shout, his muscles bulging, and clamped his hands down like pliers, lifting it with all his might. He lifted it right up. Amazing. We should have done this from the start. Wasted over 10 minutes, Professor Peng said. In his mind, he thought that since the scurrying squad had mutants, they should help. Slow was better than just sitting and waiting. Right at that moment, a dark shadow swept over Professor Peng's head. He jumped and let out a gasp of shock, making the soldiers turn around simultaneously, only to freeze in their tracks. A gleaming, modern metallic mechanical arm was moving swiftly toward the largest boulder. The mechanical fingers opened with a clicking sound, clamped down tightly, and tightened. The massive boulder was effortlessly lifted into the air. Everyone wanted to rub their eyes. The scene looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. They followed the other end of the mechanical arm and saw it connected to the minibus, as if it were a part of the vehicle. The whole group was dumbfounded, unable to utter a word. The minibus had suddenly turned into a crane. Professor Peng was the most shocked. Every method he had imagined was violent and dangerous, which was why he opposed me. Little did he expect the sight before his eyes to exceed all imagination. The minibus sprouted a mechanical arm. Compared to this, manual clearing was nothing. It was highly safe, precisely controlled, and saved both time and effort. Zhou Chongqing, holding the boulder in his arms, also stood rooted to the spot. It took him so much effort to lift it, yet that mechanical arm lifted a boulder 3 times the size as if it were weightless. Captain Zhang, what is this? He asked. I replied, created by my ability. Before it was finished, even I didn't know how it would turn out. I wasn't lying. Knowing there was a landslide, I immediately thought of the base vehicle's upgrade paths in the Star Seed and decided to enhance it with a mechanical arm. With enough metal in the vehicle's storage, plus a mutant crystal core and 15 minutes of construction, the mechanical arm was complete. The Star Seed didn't provide much description, so when Professor Peng pressed for answers, it was hard for me to explain. At that moment, Jiang Zhuing blurted out, Brother, why did this car suddenly turn into an excavator? An excavator. Hearing Jiang Zhuing say that, and seeing her mischievous smile, I could only shake my head helplessly. You really are a troublemaker. Equipping the base vehicle with a mechanical arm was actually one of the basic initial upgrade options, along with expanding the mutant fuel tank. Previously, I couldn't bear to waste any mutant crystal cores on things like this. All the resources I gathered were prioritized for enhancing the base vehicle's combat power, while I handled transporting supplies manually. Now that I had more crystal cores on hand, I dared to be a bit extravagant. Not to mention, this mechanical arm would definitely have many uses in the future. With the support of the mechanical arm, the speed of clearing the landslide debris increased significantly. The large boulders were all handled by the base vehicle, while the soldiers took care of the smaller rocks. There were quite a few soldiers in the escort squad who had backgrounds as mechanical engineers. They had seen excavators and all sorts of construction vehicles, and some were even highly skilled. But when they saw the base vehicle driven by Ing, its mechanical arm nimbly clearing the landslide debris, everyone couldn't hide their amazement at the control skills and the precision of this equipment. No matter how skillfully an excavator was operated, it was inherently bulky and clumsy. But this mechanical arm was completely different. It had 5 fingers, mimicking a human hand, and could rotate at any angle. This kind of equipment was previously only seen in robot demo videos or sci-fi movies, originally intended for high-tech tasks. They had never seen anyone use it as an excavator like this. Watching the 5 nimble fingers effortlessly lift boulders of all sizes, the mechanical engineers on site felt both amazed and a sense of waste. Especially when they saw the mechanical arm easily lift a boulder weighing tens of tons, everyone was stunned. Just how strong was this arm? Furthermore, the minibus didn't look very large, yet when lifting such heavy objects, it maintained its balance perfectly without any sign of tipping over. It was truly miraculous. A skinny soldier, about 40 years old, couldn't hide his admiration. He had 2 thick stripes and 1 thin stripe on his shoulder. Although his rank wasn't high, his status was far from simple. He was a veteran mechanical engineer in the military, highly respected even by many high-ranking officers. A pity, a real pity. Captain Zhang's ability, if it had appeared before the apocalypse, I'm afraid it could have changed the entire global industrial landscape. That statement surprised quite a few people. Changing the entire industrial landscape? Wasn't that an exaggeration? It's just a high-end excavator, isn't it? An 18 or 19-year-old young man chimed in. What do you know? The skinny soldier snapped lightly, glaring at the rookie. Just manufacturing a mechanical arm for construction is extremely difficult. Controlling one part to move in one direction is hard enough, but getting multiple mechanical parts to coordinate precisely and synchronize at various angles increases the difficulty dozens of times over. Do you know about 5-axis CNC machines? To create those, do you know what price Huaxia had to pay? He seemed to recall the arduous years, his voice growing more urgent. In the past, our machining tools were mostly 3-axis. Even before the apocalypse, the number of 5-axis machines in the country could be counted on one hand. Their efficiency was far behind foreign ones, and they were strictly embargoed. Remember in 1983, Japan's Toshiba sold a few outdated 5-axis machines to the Soviet Union. The Soviets used them to make submarine propellers, reducing the noise so much that U.S. sonar couldn't detect them. As a result, the U.S. sanctioned Toshiba and arrested its top executives. He took a deep breath and continued. Going from 3-axis to 5-axis was already that hard. But this mechanical arm is much harder. It has 5 fingers, and each finger has as many joints as a human hand. Meanwhile, a 5-axis machine is ultimately just a single drill bit. Hearing about the Soviet Union and the U.S., everyone's expressions turned serious. For a nation, precision machining tools are a crucial foundation, directly reflecting its industrial manufacturing level. From this perspective, my mechanical manufacturing ability, if it could create precision mechanical equipment, would indeed have a massive impact on the national industry. It was just that right now, such an exquisite, biomimetic mechanical arm with fully articulated fingers was being used by me as an excavator. Watching the large boulders being lifted one after another, the skinny soldier could only shake his head. In his heart, he felt both regret and a fear of imagining what the seniors who dedicated their lives to Huaxia's industry would think if they saw this scene. With the mechanical arm's support, the landslide area was cleared in less than half an hour. The mechanical arm retracted. I rolled down the window and told the squad behind, "It's done. Let's keep moving." Hearing my calm voice and recalling the analysis just now, many soldiers had slightly strange expressions. Did that mean my manufacturing ability had surpassed the world's most advanced mechanical production level? Thinking of this, many couldn't help but shudder. Not just in combat, But even in rebuilding the world later, my ability was an extremely terrifying power. The convoy continued forward as planned. Even before the apocalypse, this mountain road rarely saw any traffic, so there weren't many zombies. The cars that crashed when the virus broke out had plunged into the ravine long ago. Along the way, we only saw sections of broken guardrails. Rusted iron bars swayed gently in the wind, as if silently recounting the terrifying moments of the apocalypse. Zhou Changqing pointed at the map and said, "Ahead is Yi County of Jiangbei. The highway forces us to pass through it." But before the apocalypse, this was just a small county with a population of a few tens of thousands. The number of zombies shouldn't be high, so it's not a major threat. Hearing the name Yi County, my heart trembled slightly. This used to be my mother's hometown. When I was young, I lived there for a long time. Even though my mother passed away long ago, I didn't want to see the place destroyed and overrun by zombies with my own eyes. As the convoy gradually approached Yi County, Zhou Changqing stood on the roof of the armored vehicle, observing through binoculars. Then he suddenly said something that made the atmosphere heavy. "This Yi County, it seems it's not that simple." Through the binoculars, the bloody, corpse-filled scene I had imagined didn't appear at all. Instead, deep inside Yi County, right at the foot of the mountain, Zhou Changqing saw a newly built city wall. And the strangest part was that the entire wall was made of stone. Building a stone wall like that was no easy feat. Even a survivor group of hundreds would find it hard to erect a wall 5 or 6 meters high. With a wall like this, it seems quite a few survivors have gathered in this little Yi County. Zhou Changqing's voice over the radio made me pause. From this distance, I could also clearly see the towering stone wall standing out among the low-rise houses in the town. In the apocalypse, lacking machinery, materials, and with food being scarce, building such a structure was truly a colossal undertaking. Perhaps there was a very strong mutant here. The survivors were protected quite well, even establishing a simple base. That gave me some peace of mind. After all, this was where I lived during my childhood. I didn't want it to turn into hell. "Shiyu," I called out softly. Rin Shiyu nodded. Without me needing to say more, she expanded her perception range, piercing through the city wall to cover the area behind it. There are a lot of people inside. About 400 to 500. Among them are 4 or 5 mutants. 400 or 500 people. This number, compared to Yi County's pre-apocalyptic population of tens of thousands, wasn't small. I immediately reported this to Zhou Changqing. The main road passed right through the city wall. No matter what, we had to enter this gathering place. The armored vehicle took the lead, and the whole squad continued forward. At the same time, inside the city wall, it was a completely different scene. "Boss Sun, the military is here. Lots of people, lots of guns, and even an armored vehicle." The survivor gathering place had a small palace built in the style of the Ming and Qing dynasties. Although many parts looked rather bizarre due to limited conditions, having a palace like this in the middle of the apocalypse was still astonishing. The palace was surrounded by walls, divided into a front hall and a rear harem. Outside, there was even a moat about 10 meters wide, drawing water from Yi County's river. The military? Armored vehicles? The man called Boss Sun was over 40, wearing a bright yellow robe, with thick eyebrows, a tall build, and an imposing demeanor. Hearing the news, his face instantly tensed up. "Damn it, why would the military come to a tiny place like Yi County?" he said as he took off his robe, changed into neat clothes, and followed the messenger up the city wall. From afar, he saw 7 or 8 military vehicles lined up, led by a Type 92 wheeled armored vehicle. In the middle was an out-of-place minibus, followed by heavy trucks. The long unswept road kicked up clouds of dust under the tires. The momentum was overwhelming. Boss Sun's expression instantly changed. There were at least several dozen people, fully armed. If the military targeted this base, he would have no way to defend it. The base had quite a bit of food and fuel. Since Yi County was an agricultural county, after the apocalypse, he had collected all the food from the county's warehouses. He was even planning to expand farming, turning this place into his own private kingdom. Who would have thought the military would suddenly show up? The armored vehicle stopped right below the city wall. Zhou Changqing saw the middle-aged man standing above and used a megaphone to shout, "Open the gates." "Boss, what do we do?" The man surnamed Sun took a deep breath. The gate looked sturdy, but if the armored vehicle rammed it, it would be hard to hold. He pursed his lips. Open the gates. Tell everyone to hide all the food and fuel. The city gates opened, and I drove the minibus inside. This place, right behind the wall, used to be where I lived during my childhood. But now my grandparents' house was gone, replaced by a palace and a moat. What is this? I was stunned. Building a city wall was one thing, but erecting a palace? In this apocalypse, even a base for 400 or 500 people would struggle to do this. The fact that my grandparents' house was demolished made me even more uncomfortable. Surrounding the palace and moat were densely packed civilian houses. Because the palace took up a large area, the living space for ordinary people was squeezed tight. There were decent brick houses, but also many tents, rotting wooden shacks, and even places just covered with plastic tarps. The slum, the ordinary residential area, and the extravagant palace sat side by side. The class division was laid bare. I had traveled to many places in the apocalypse, but rarely saw such a stark contrast. Brother, did you notice? This palace and the city wall are all built with large stones, without using any cement, Jiang Zhuing suddenly said. I looked again. Indeed, the stone blocks were cut and fitted perfectly. Without modern machinery, it was hard to imagine. Unless it was thanks to an ability. That possibility made me even more uneasy. Being able to build a palace like this, yet letting many citizens live without enough food or clothing. That made me very uncomfortable. Along the way, I saw many thin, starving citizens. Seeing the military, some looked dazed, some excited, some terrified. There was absolutely no scene of people crowding to welcome us like I had imagined. These people lived truly miserable lives. Many must have starved to death. I knew well that Yi County was an agricultural county. The food reserves after the apocalypse should have been plentiful. Yet the lives of the common people here were still extremely difficult. This massive disparity was clearly deliberately created by the ruler. The ambition for power often makes people ruthless, even actively creating classes to consolidate their position. As I was thinking, I saw an RV approaching from a distance. The vehicle stopped, and a tall, middle-aged man with a welcoming face stepped out. He smiled warmly. Yi County welcomes you all. You must be exhausted from the long journey. The armored vehicle stopped, and Zhou Chongqing jumped down first. He glanced at the middle-aged man opposite him and asked bluntly, "Who are you?" This person exuded an aura that wasn't weak at all. He was clearly a mutant, and not a mediocre one at that. The man surnamed Sun laughed heartily and introduced himself. My surname is Sun, just call me Old Sunday. In this tiny Yi County, I suppose I have a bit of authority. May I ask what brings you military gentlemen here? Saying that, he offered Zhou Chongqing a cigarette, his tone very cautious. Zhou Chongqing glanced at the pack of cigarettes, a hint of mockery flashing in his eyes. Chunghua. In the apocalypse, even hand-rolled cigarettes were a luxury, let alone this brand. Even military leaders had to quit smoking because there was nothing left to smoke. Zhou Chongqing didn't take it. With his years of experience in the military, he instantly saw through the other party's anxiety. He was clearly afraid the military had come to plunder his assets. In a lawless world, the strong had the right to decide the fate of the weak. If they met a commander with no moral boundaries, the military would be no different from bandits. We're just passing through on a mission. We're borrowing the road and taking a short rest in the town, Zhou Chongqing said calmly. Haha, that's wonderful. You are guests here. If you need anything, just tell Old Sun, I'll definitely host you properly. No need for hosting. We have rations. Zhou Chongqing waved his hand, then continued. But if Mr. Sun has reserves of fuel or food, our military is willing to buy them with mutant beast meat. The price is negotiable. On the way to Yi County, he had seen empty gas stations and grain depots. Yet this man surnamed Sun had a rosy complexion and clearly lacked no wealth. Hearing about mutant beast meat, Old Sun's eyes lit up, but he quickly shook his head. Captain, you must be joking. Where would we get fuel and food? Yi County has hundreds of mouths to feed. Production hasn't recovered, and we ourselves are short on food and water. He really craved the mutant beast meat, but he knew well that transactions in the apocalypse had to be based on equal strength. Otherwise, the other side could completely just open fire and rob them clean. Then he'd have nothing left. Is that so? Zhou Chongqing smiled with hidden meaning, making Old Sun inevitably tense up. I didn't pay much attention to this conversation. I could tell Old Sun was a local tyrant. relying on his strength to exploit the people for his own enjoyment. But I had no intention of overthrowing him and distributing food to everyone. This was the apocalypse. The strong made the rules. When morals and laws no longer bound people, human greed and cruelty being exposed was normal. Even though Old Sun lived extravagantly while many starved to death, from another perspective, he was the one who built the city wall and protected the survivors in Yi County. Without that wall, I'm afraid this place wouldn't have so many people left. Of course, if Zhou Chongqing really wanted to force a trade, or even rob the fuel and food, I was ready to take a share. In the apocalypse, no one needed to pretend to be noble. Robbing resources from a local tyrant wouldn't make me feel guilty in the slightest. Turn left at the intersection ahead, into the alley. Go another 700 or 800 meters, then turn right at the crossroads, I directed. Since I had returned to my mother's hometown, I wanted to drop by and visit. The ancestral home was gone, but after the family split, my uncle lived quite well and had built a 2-story house in Yi County. That house was still there. In the city, only the rich lived in villas, but in the Jiangnan countryside, a 2-story house was very common. The cost was only 1/10 to 1/5 of an apartment in the city. When I was young, I often stayed at my uncle's house. He only had one daughter, so he treated me like a son. My aunt's cooking was delicious, and I especially loved it. My older cousin, Su-han, always protected me. I was skinny and weak as a kid. Whenever I got bullied, she would drag me along to get revenge. Those memories, from catching grasshoppers, picking mushrooms, digging sweet potatoes, to wading in the water to catch fish, were all beautiful fragments. But after leaving Yi County, I contacted my uncle's family less and less. I only knew my cousin Su-han got into a pretty good agricultural university. Recalling all this, I felt like a lifetime had passed. The closer we got to my uncle's house, the faster my heart beat, fearing I would face a scene of ruin or hear the bad news of the whole family's death in the early days of the apocalypse. As the base vehicle entered the increasingly narrow streets, the surroundings became familiar. Though many places had changed, I vaguely recognized their original shapes. The roads were paved with cheap concrete. With Ying's skills, the vehicle easily navigated the cramped streets. Finally, I saw my uncle's 2-story house with white walls and a blue-tiled roof. The front yard was older than in my memory, but the plants were still green and not overgrown with vines, proving someone was taking care of it. I stopped the vehicle. Before me was a tightly closed door. The road in front of the house was quite clean, clearly still inhabited. I opened the car door and called out loudly, "It's Xiao Shi. Is anyone home?" I hoped to see my uncle's figure appear. Jiang Zhuing curiously poked her head out to look. She was young and didn't have many memories of my uncle's family. "Uncle, is anyone home?" No one answered. I called out again, my voice quite loud. The people inside should have heard it. I glanced at Renshiyu. She nodded and said softly, "Brother Zhang, there are people inside. They're coming out." Just as she finished speaking, the door swung open. A strange, burly man holding an iron pipe, with disheveled clothes and a flushed, irritated face, appeared. "Who the hell are you?" Yelling in broad daylight. "Are you calling for ghosts?" My expression instantly changed. "Who are you?" This person showed no signs of having an ability, but he had the build of a fitness coach, clearly not easy to deal with. He sneered, "You're asking who I am? I should be asking who you are. I live here." "Uncle what? I don't have a nephew like you. Trying to claim relatives? Get lost, or I'll smash you to death with this pipe." Saying that, he turned to go back inside, and the door slammed shut with a bang. Looking at the closed door in front of me, my face darkened completely, and I stepped straight out of the vehicle. After the apocalypse, social order had completely collapsed. I didn't know if my uncle's family was still safe, and my heart was already full of worry. Yet I ran into someone occupying my uncle's house. The anger in me instantly flared up. Bang! I threw a kick, and the door burst open. The burly man had just thrown down his iron pipe and hadn't even stepped inside when he heard the loud crash behind him. He turned his head, his eyes widening in shock as he saw me smash the door and charge straight in. He couldn't believe it. In this Yi County, there was actually someone reckless enough to do this, daring to break down the door and barge into Old Sun's territory. He was Zhang Xiong, Old Sun's trusted bodyguard. Who dared to touch him? You got a death wish. In Yi County, Old Sun was king, and Zhang Xiong was the #1 enforcer. Provoking them was no different from seeking death. "I'll smash your head in." Zhang Xiong grabbed the iron pipe and swung it viciously at my head. The pipe was as thick as 2 fingers. A direct hit would definitely shatter a skull. After the apocalypse, killing someone was no big deal anyway. My eyes were cold. I took a step forward, grabbed his wrist with one hand, and delivered a heavy punch to his shoulder with the other. The force of the blow was so strong it numbed him. The iron pipe fell to the ground, and his right arm instantly lost all strength. I didn't give him a chance to react. I grabbed that arm and twisted it hard. The dry crack of breaking bone rang out. Zhang Xiong let out a blood-curdling scream. My arm! My arm!" He collapsed to the ground, clutching his completely ruined right arm, convulsing in pain. "You." He trembled, unable to form a complete sentence, his eyes filled with terror. Before the apocalypse, he was a bodybuilder, and after, he trained even more in combat. This iron pipe had smashed countless zombie heads. Killing a person was as easy as flipping his hand. Yet today, he suffered a miserable defeat at my hands. I kicked him aside and stepped squarely on his chest, pressing down so hard he couldn't breathe. Right then, hurried footsteps echoed. 3 more people ran out from inside the house, 2 women and 1 man. Seeing the scene in the courtyard, all 3 froze. Who are you?" one of the women asked in panic. I kept a cold face, while Zhang Xiong under my foot could only groan. I asked them, "Where did the original owners of this house go?" "Let him go?" The remaining man tried to act tough, but his voice clearly betrayed his fear. "I'll ask one last time. Where did the original owners go?" My voice was as cold as ice. He refused to yield and pulled out a gun hidden behind his back. But in that exact moment, a black streak shot forward. The 3-bladed military knife thrown by Ying embedded itself straight into his wrist. He screamed in agony. The gun dropped to the ground, and blood gushed out. In just a few seconds, the 2 people capable of fighting were eliminated. The 2 remaining women were pale with fright, trembling so much they couldn't stand straight. The original owners, we don't know where they went. Earlier, a few good houses were cleared out, and we were chosen to move in. The original owners were probably pushed into the slum. Yi County City Wall only covered a small area, and the palace took up a massive amount of space. There wasn't enough housing. Those with power lived in good houses, while ordinary citizens were herded into the slum. That was the rule here. But in the apocalypse, strength decided everything. I had returned, and I could completely change that rule. The slum? My face darkened. I had seen that place. Chaotic, filthy, houses cobbled together from plastic and wooden boards, unable to shield against wind or rain. If my uncle and aunt were there, the risk of getting sick and dying was huge. I kicked Zhang Xiong away. I turned and rushed outside, jumped onto the minibus, and started the engine. Zhang Xiong lay curled up on the ground, his face pale from pain, stammering to the 2 women. Quick, report to old son. Tell him to deal with this brat. Damn it, it hurts to death." Yi County slum was incredibly chaotic. Finding someone wasn't easy. After driving around without finding any clues, I drove the vehicle straight to the front gates of the palace. To find someone, I had to let the locals do it. Ignoring the guards, I drove the minibus straight inside. Get out. Who are you to barge into the palace?" Except for Boss Son, everyone must get out of their vehicles. A guard yelled and was about to draw his gun, but the base vehicle had already reached the main hall in the blink of an eye. The palace was larger than a civilian house, but it still only took a few seconds to cross. The guards chased after me just as old son stepped out of the main hall. He had already heard that someone attacked his men in the slum and was driving a minibus. He immediately guessed it was me. I stopped the vehicle right in front of the main hall without stepping out. Old son's face instantly turned incredibly ugly. He had ruled Yi County for a long time. Anyone who disobeyed was beheaded as a warning. Yet now, someone dared to drive a vehicle straight into his palace. Even though he didn't know my true strength, he knew I was with the military. And he didn't dare casually mess with military personnel. With just an excuse, the other side could completely wipe this place out. Brother, what is the meaning of this? I already said, guest from a far-off family. I gave you all enough face, yet you beat up my men, and now you barge straight into my palace. What's the meaning of this? I sat in the driver's seat, my voice calm. I want you to find 3 people for me. Old Sun immediately realized the situation was far from simple. In Yi County, he was king. But facing people who knew no fear and had the military backing them, he was forced to weigh his every step. Find someone. Old Sun was burning with rage inside. But because I was with the military, he could only suppress it. Find who? The original owners of house number 38 on North Street, I replied decisively. Previously, my uncle's family had been kicked out of their home by Old Sun's men. After the apocalypse, laws collapsed. Those without strength found it almost impossible to keep what was theirs. The corner of Old Sun's mouth twitched. He thought to himself, this brat needs my help, yet he dares to give me orders? He assumed I was the leader of a small survivor group cooperating with the military, not a regular soldier. My squad only had 6 or 7 people. Compared to a local emperor like him, it was nothing. Yet, relying on the military's backing, I dared to be arrogant in front of him, and he couldn't do anything about it. He cursed inwardly, a dog relying on its master's power. If he wasn't wary of the military, he would have shot me dead long ago. I'll have my men look for them. You can leave now. I'm coming with you, I said coldly. I just need a guide. As for the people, I have to find them myself to be at ease. Old Sun scowled but still waved his hand, ordering a guard to lead me to the slum. Watching me leave, murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Boss, should we? A man in his 30s leaned in, making a throat-slitting gesture. Old Sun shook his head. Don't touch them. They're relying on the military. If the military uses this as an excuse to strike, we'll be in big trouble. Endure it. On the base vehicle, Ing, who was driving, said softly, Brother Zhang, that guy surnamed Sun wants to kill you. I felt it too. I replied nonchalantly. Seeing the palace he built, I knew he considered himself the king of Yi County. His subordinates bowed to him, so of course he was furious when he met me. That didn't bother me. If I hadn't thought about the 400 or 500 citizens in the county, I might have killed him from the start. I followed the guard into the slum. This place was chaotic, with a maze of alleys. Without a guide, finding one family was almost like finding a needle in a haystack. At the same time, inside Old Sun's palace. After the apocalypse, Yi County completely lost power. No phones, no TV. Besides finding women for pleasure, he had no other hobbies. The massive palace obviously wasn't for him to live in alone. The harem was for his concubines, over a dozen of them, with a packed schedule enough for him to enjoy the long nights. Having just been angered by me, he was about to find someone to vent his frustration on when he suddenly heard a woman's voice behind him. What a luxurious palace. A harem of over a dozen beauties, guards, ministers. The apocalypse is hell for others, but for Old Sun, it's paradise. Even ancient kings might not have had it this good. The unfamiliar voice made his hair stand on end. A woman suddenly appearing in his bedchamber like a ghost. It had to be an assassin. Someone sent by the military to assassinate him. The thought flashed, and he lunged forward, drawing his gun. The stone beneath his feet shattered, swirling up to encase his entire body in stone armor. Who are you? He was about to pull the trigger when a black whip lashed out. The gun in his hand was sent flying. Old Sun, don't get excited. We just came to talk. We? He shuddered. It wasn't just one person. If it was one, he'd be confident, but not with many. Even though the other party said they meant no harm, he understood it was best not to act rashly right now. From 2 dark corners, 2 people stepped out, 1 man, 1 woman. The woman was in a tight black leather outfit, holding a long whip. Clearly, she was the one who just attacked. Who are you? How did you get in here? He asked in a deep voice, the crushed stones still swirling around him. The man with her spoke up. He was dressed in black, tall, and slender. You can consider us military personnel, but not the group you just met. As for how we got in, if we couldn't even enter the palace of an ordinary person like you, how could we go out and get things done? He looked at the stone armor and smirked. Controlling rocks. No wonder a small county has a city wall and a palace. You used your ability, plus manual labor, to build all this, huh? Quite the player. Old Sun's face darkened. He stepped back, sat down on a chair, took a deep breath, and calmed down. You're from the military, but not with that group. Coming to see me. Could it be you have a conflict with them and want revenge? He thought of cooperation. Yi County was small, with no major threats around. The goal of cooperation was very likely to deal with another group. That analysis surprises me. The woman with the whip smiled and clapped her hands. It seems you don't just rely on brute strength. You guessed right, but not entirely. We're not targeting the military. Our target is just one person driving that minibus. You must have met him already. The minibus? That brat.